Hey everybody! Today we've got a story about a guy who was supposed to have the best night of his career. His company's annual awards dinner, where he's getting promoted in front of everyone. And instead, his girlfriend turned it into a public humiliation attempt. She spent the entire evening making snide comments, and then, during his acceptance speech, she said something so loud and so cruel that the whole room heard it. And what did he do? He didn't yell. He didn't cause a scene. He finished his speech, walked right past her without a word, drove home, packed her belongings, changed the locks, and left her bags on the porch. When she showed up later, the door was locked and her stuff was waiting for her. His boss called the next morning and said something I've never heard a boss say. This one is ice cold. Let's get into it. My girlfriend told an entire room I only got promoted because my boss felt sorry for me. I finished my speech, drove home, packed her things, and changed the locks before she could get back. I want to say up front that I'm not someone who does things on impulse. I plan, I think, I process. That's literally what I do for a living. I'm a project coordinator at an architectural firm. My job is to take a blueprint that exists on paper and turn it into a real building that exists in the world, on time, on budget, without anything falling apart. You'd be surprised how much of that job is just anticipating problems before they happen. Seeing the crack before the wall splits. What I did after the awards dinner might look impulsive from the outside, like I snapped. But I didn't. What happened that night was the last straw in a pile of straws I'd been counting for months. I didn't snap. I just finally stopped pretending the pile wasn't there. My name's Nate. I'm 31. I've been at Whitmore and Lynn Architects for just over 4 years. Started as a junior coordinator, basically running errands and tracking submittals and making sure nobody forgot to order the right fixtures for the third floor of a mixed-use building in Delaware. That actually happened once. Someone forgot the light fixtures for an entire floor. 300 units. No ceiling lights. The client was not amused. I worked my way up. By the end of year 2, I was managing my own projects. By year 3, I was handling multi-phase developments, the kind where you're juggling 5 contractors, 3 consultants, a city permitting office that takes 6 weeks to return a phone call, and an owner's rep who changes his mind every Tuesday. I'm good at my job. I don't say that to brag. I say it because it's relevant to what happened, and because my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend now, never believed it. Or maybe she believed it, but hated it. I'm still not sure which one is worse. Her name was Jess. We'd been together about 2 years. Met through a mutual friend at a cookout, one of those summer things where somebody knows somebody, and you end up talking by the grill for 2 hours about nothing in particular. She was funny, energetic. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office, which she described as answering phones and pretending to care about people's insurance questions. That made me laugh. She had this dry, almost cutting sense of humor that I found attractive at first. Took me a while to realize the humor wasn't always dry. Sometimes it was just cutting. The first year was good, normal. She liked reality TV, and I'd watch it with her even though I couldn't tell you a single person's name on any of those shows. I liked going for walks after dinner. Not hikes, just walks around the neighborhood, 20 minutes, clear my head after work. She cooked this lemon chicken thing that was genuinely one of the best meals I've ever had. She made it exactly twice and then never again, which is the most frustrating thing a person can do with a recipe. She moved into my place around the 10-month mark. That's when things started to shift. All right, this is me, not Nate. I want to point something out early because it matters later. Nate describes himself as a planner, someone who sees problems before they arrive, someone who coordinates chaos for a living. And then he describes Jess's humor as a cutting and says it took him a while to notice. That's the blind spot, right there. The guy who catches every detail at work missed the biggest red flag in his own kitchen. It happens. We're all worse at reading the blueprints of our own lives than we are at reading someone else's. Just remember this. When Nate finally does read the blueprint, he doesn't panic. He executes. And he executes clean. The shift was subtle. It wasn't like Jess changed overnight. It was more like the volume got turned up slowly on something that was always playing in the background. Little comments, small digs. The kind of thing where if you call it out, the other person says, "I was just joking," or "You're being too sensitive," and you start wondering if maybe you are. It started with the hours. My job isn't 9 to 5. Some weeks it's closer to 7 to 6, especially when a project hits a critical phase, inspections, client walkthroughs, closeout documentation. I'd come home at 6:30 and Jess would say something like, "Oh, look who decided to show up." The first few times I laughed it off. Then it became, "Must be nice to have a job that's more important than your relationship." I'd say, "Jess, I'm salaried. I don't choose the hours." She'd say, "You could push back." I'd say, "That's not how it works." She'd say, "Maybe you just don't want to." Then it was the money. I make decent money, not spectacular, but comfortable. Enough to own a 2-bedroom house, small, older, but mine, keep my truck running, and put a little away each month. Jess made less, which was fine. I never cared about the income gap. But she did. Or rather, she cared about mine, in a way that didn't feel like pride. It felt like resentment. When I got a year-end bonus, her response was, "Must be nice." When I mentioned a raise during my annual review, she said, "For what? Sending emails?" I said, "That's not what I do." She said, I know. You're very important." She said it the way people say it when they mean the opposite. The worst of it was how she talked about my job to other people. At dinners with friends, at family gatherings, whenever my work came up. She had this way of minimizing it that was so casual it almost sounded affectionate if you weren't paying attention. Nate basically babysits buildings. Or, he's like a really expensive secretary. Or, and this one actually stung, he pushes paper and calls it a career. She'd say these things with a smile, sometimes with her hand on my arm, like the physical contact was supposed to neutralize the words. It didn't. But I'd smile and change the subject, because that's what I do. I don't make scenes. I manage situations. I should have seen it for what it was. I did see it, honestly. I just kept hoping it would stop. I kept thinking, maybe she's having a bad stretch at work. Maybe she's stressed about money. Maybe this is just how she processes her own insecurity, and it'll pass. It didn't pass. It got louder. There were good moments too, and I want to be fair about that. She surprised me with concert tickets for my birthday, a band I'd mentioned liking once, months earlier. She remembered. She helped me paint the guest bedroom one weekend, and we laughed the entire time because she kept getting paint in her hair. Those moments were real, but they were getting rarer, and the space between them was filling up with something else. I also want to mention, and this is kind of random, she had this habit of rearranging the fridge every Sunday. Not cleaning it, rearranging it. She'd take everything out, put it back in a different order, and never explain why. I asked her once and she said, "It just feels better this way." Every Sunday, same ritual, new fridge layout. I still don't understand it, but it was one of those things that made her, her. Not everything about a person you leave was bad. Some of it was just weird and harmless and kind of endearing. But the awards dinner, that's where it stopped being something I could sort through and became something I had to act on. The firm does an annual awards night every spring. Semi-formal, not black tie, but a step above business casual. They rent out a venue, set up round tables, decent food. The partners give out awards for Project of the Year, Team of the Year, that sort of thing. And this year, they were announcing promotions. I knew I was getting one. My direct supervisor, a woman named Grace Lynn, one of the firm's founding partners, had told me 2 weeks earlier. She pulled me into her office, closed the door and said, "Nate, you've earned this. Senior Project Coordinator. It comes with a team, a raise, and your name on the org chart in a box that matters." I said, "Thank you." She said, "Don't thank me. You did the work. I'm just the one handing you the title." Grace is like that. Direct, no nonsense, never gives you a compliment she doesn't mean. If Grace tells you you've earned something, you've earned it. I told Jess that night. I was excited. Genuinely, visibly excited, which isn't my usual mode. I said, "They're promoting me at the awards dinner. Senior coordinator. It's a big deal." She looked at me for a second and said, "Okay, cool. That's it? Okay, cool." Like I'd told her I found a good parking spot. I stood there in the kitchen waiting for something more. A hug, a congratulations. That's amazing, Nate." She turned back to her phone and said, "What time is the dinner? I need to know what to wear." I should have known then. I should have gone to that dinner alone. But I didn't, because I was still trying to make it work. Still hoping the person I'd fallen for would show up again. she didn't. Let me step in here with a different angle. Think about the emotional math Jess is doing. Her boyfriend just told her he's getting a major promotion, a title, a raise, a team. And her response was, okay, cool. That's not indifference. That's hostility wearing a mask. Okay, cool, followed by immediately asking what to wear? That's a person who heard good news about someone else and felt it as bad news about themselves. That's not a partner. That's a competitor who's losing. And competitors who are losing do dangerous things, especially in public. I'm calling Jess the saboteur from here on out. You'll see why in about 5 minutes. The night of the awards dinner, I put on my good suit. Navy, white shirt, no tie. The firm isn't that formal. I'd gotten a haircut the day before. I looked good. I felt good. I'd worked 4 years for this moment and I was going to enjoy it. Jess took 45 minutes to get ready, which is fine. I don't rush people on things like that. She wore a dark green dress. She looked nice. I told her she looked nice. She said, "Thanks, you have a stain on your cuff." I looked. There was no stain. I looked back at her. She shrugged and said, "Guess it was a shadow." That was the vibe for the evening. Compliment deflected, confidence poked. It was like she couldn't let me feel good for more than 10 seconds without inserting a small needle. We got to the venue around 6:30. It was at a place called the Winslow, one of those restored event spaces with exposed brick and high ceilings and lighting that makes everyone look slightly better than they actually do. Round tables of 8, a podium at the front, a slide deck running on a projector with project photos. My co-workers were already there. Alec, who works on the same project track as me. Priya, who handles the interior design coordination, and Liam, who's a junior coordinator I've been mentoring for the past year. Everyone was in a good mood. It was shaping up to be a great night. And then the saboteur got to work. It started at the table, during appetizers. Alec asked me if I was nervous about the announcement, and I said, "A little. I'm not great at public speaking." Jess said, "You're not great at private speaking either." She laughed. Nobody else did. Alex sort of smiled politely and looked at his plate. I let it go. During the salad course, and yes, I remember the courses because my brain catalogs things when I'm stressed. It's a coping mechanism, don't judge me. Priya mentioned that she'd heard great things about a residential project I'd just wrapped up. She said, "The client raved about you in the feedback survey." I said, "That's nice to hear." Jess said, "Probably because he's a pushover and gives clients whatever they want." Priya's face went blank, like she didn't know how to respond to that. She said, "I don't think that's how project coordination works." Jess said, "I'm kidding. Relax." She wasn't kidding. She's never kidding when she says she's kidding. That's the trick. The word kidding is the escape hatch. It lets you say whatever you want and then retreat behind plausible deniability. I'd heard "I'm kidding" 100 times. It never meant she was kidding. Between the salad and the main course, she made a comment about my salary. At the table, in front of my coworkers. She said, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, "I hope this promotion comes with actual money, because coordinating isn't exactly a high-paying gig." Liam, the junior coordinator I mentor, was sitting right there. He literally does the same job I do, just at a lower level. She said that in front of him. I looked at Liam and saw him staring at his water glass like he was trying to astral project out of his body. I said, "Jess." She said, "What?" "I'm just being honest." Here's what I want people to understand. Every one of those comments individually is survivable. You can absorb one hit. You can absorb 5. You can smile and redirect and change the subject and tell yourself it's not that bad. But they accumulate. They build pressure. And by the time the entree plates were cleared and the awards presentation was starting, I was sitting in my chair with a pulse rate that was probably double what it should have been, pretending to be calm while the person sitting next to me, the person who was supposed to be my biggest supporter, was actively undermining me in front of the people I work with. The awards started. Grace Lynn took the podium. She went through the standard stuff: Project of the Year, a mixed-use development in Wilmington that I'd actually contributed to, team recognition, years of service awards. Then she got to the promotions. She said, "This year, we're promoting 2 individuals to senior coordinator." Both of them have demonstrated the kind of dedication and skill that defines this firm. She announced the first promotion, a woman named Dana from the other project track. Everyone clapped. Then Grace said, "And our second promotion goes to someone who has consistently delivered results on every project he's touched. He handles pressure with composure, earns the trust of clients and contractors alike, and he does it all without ever needing to be the loudest person in the room. Nate Alderman, congratulations." The room applauded. My table applauded. Alex slapped my shoulder. Priya was beaming. Liam looked genuinely happy for me. I stood up. I walked to the podium. Grace shook my hand and leaned in and said, "Go get 'em." I adjusted the microphone. I had a few notes on my phone, but I'd mostly planned to speak from the heart. Thank Grace, thank my team. Keep it short and sincere. I said, "Thank you, Grace, and thank you to the partners for this opportunity. I want to acknowledge the people who made this possible. My project teams, my mentors, and especially the junior coordinators who make my job easier every day." I looked at Liam. He gave me a small nod. I said, 4 years ago, I walked into this firm not knowing if I could. And then I heard it. From the table. From Jess. Not whispered, not muttered. Said at full conversational volume, the kind of volume that carries in a room with high ceilings and exposed brick and no carpet to absorb sound. He only got this because his boss feels sorry for him. The room didn't gasp. It did something worse. It went quiet. That specific kind of quiet where 50 people all hear the same thing at the same time and nobody knows what to do with it. I could see faces turning, not toward me, toward the table, toward Jess. She was looking at her phone, like she hadn't said it, like it was a thought that accidentally leaked out and she was pretending it hadn't happened. I stood at the podium. The microphone was still on. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting to see what I'd do, waiting to see if I'd crumble or snap or address it. I took a breath, and I finished my speech. I said, 4 years ago, I walked into this firm not knowing if I could handle the workload. The people in this room showed me I could. I'm grateful. Thank you. I stepped away from the podium. The room applauded again, louder this time, and I think some of that applause was for the composure, not just the promotion. I walked back toward my table. I passed Jess's chair. I didn't look at her. I didn't say a word. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair, took my keys from the table, and walked out of the room. I heard Alex say, "Nate," but I was already through the door. I've covered a lot of stories on this channel, a lot of public humiliation attempts, but this one is different. The saboteur didn't just insult Nate. She insulted him at the podium, during his speech, in front of his boss, his mentees, the firm's partners, his entire professional world. She tried to rewrite his proudest career moment as charity. That's not a joke. That's a grenade. But here's the thing about Nate. The man doesn't react. He responds. He picked up his jacket, took his keys, walked out without a word. That silence? That's not defeat. That's a man who already knows exactly what he's going to do next. I drove home. 15 minutes. I didn't speed. I didn't slam the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I was calm in a way that might sound strange, but if you've ever reached the absolute end of something, the true, final, no going back end, you know what I'm talking about. It's not rage, it's clarity. Everything gets very quiet inside your head and you just know. You know what you're going to do and you know you're going to do it right now. I got home at 8:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when I parked. I walked inside. I went to the bedroom. I pulled out 2 large duffel bags from the closet, the same bags she'd moved in with, actually, and I started packing her things. Clothes first. Hangers off the rod, into bags. Dresser drawers, her side, 3 drawers, emptied into the second bag. Bathroom, her products, her toothbrush, the electric one she was very particular about, her hairdryer. Shoes from the closet floor, the charger she kept on her nightstand. A framed photo of her family from the bookshelf. A stack of books she'd been meaning to read for the entire time I'd known her. She never read them. They just sat there collecting dust and looking literary, which I think was the point. I packed her things and only her things. Thorough, but fast. The whole process took about 40 minutes. I carried the bags to the front porch, set them down neatly, Not thrown, not scattered. Placed, side by side, zipped shut, the tote bag on top. Then I called a locksmith. I know people are going to have opinions about it, but Jess had a key to my house. My house. My name on the mortgage, my name on the deed. She was not on any lease because there was no lease. I own the property. I looked into the legal side of this later, and yes, there are complications around informal tenancy rights. But that night I wasn't thinking about legal nuances. I was thinking about the fact that I did not want this person in my home when I went to sleep. The locksmith, a guy named Dale who I'd actually used once before when I locked myself out, arrived in about 25 minutes. Good guy. Didn't ask questions. Changed both the front door and the side door. New keys, new deadbolts, $160 cash. I tipped him 20 because he came out on a weeknight with no notice. He said, "Rough night?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "New locks usually mean a new start." Dale drove off. I sat on the couch with the new keys in my hand and waited. Jess arrived about 45 minutes after Dale left. I heard the car pull in. I heard her heels on the walkway. Then silence. She must have seen the bags. Then the doorknob rattled. Then her key didn't work. Then she knocked. "Nate? Nate, what is going on? My key doesn't work." I didn't answer. "Nate, open the door. What is this?" I didn't answer. "Nate." I sat on the couch. I could hear her clearly through the door. She knocked harder. She tried the side door. She came back to the front. She said, "Are you serious right now? Over a joke?" A joke. She called it a joke. She told a room full of people that my promotion was a pity handout, and she called it a joke. She called my phone. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring. She sent a text. "This is ridiculous. Let me in. We can talk about this." I didn't respond. She sent another. "You're really going to lock me out over something I said at a dinner?" Yes, I was. She stood on the porch for about 15 minutes. Eventually, a car pulled up. She put the bags in the trunk. The car drove away, and the house was quiet. I sat on the couch for a while. The fridge was still arranged in whatever configuration she'd set up on Sunday. The lemon chicken recipe was still in the kitchen drawer, written on an index card in her handwriting. I wasn't going to erase her from the house that night. I was just going to make sure she wasn't in it. I slept better that night than I had in months, and I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I literally slept through the night for the first time honestly, since before she moved in. I didn't realize how much tension I'd been carrying until it was gone. Like taking off a backpack you forgot you were wearing. The next morning, Grace Lynn called me. It was around 9 a.m. I was making coffee, French press, because my drip machine broke last month, and I haven't replaced it yet. It's on the list. The list is long. The list is always long. My phone rang. Grace. She said, "Nate, I wanted to check on you." I said, "I'm fine, Grace. I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to cut the speech short." She said, "Don't you dare apologize. You have nothing to apologize for." There was a pause. Then she said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. "You handled that with more class than anyone I've ever seen. In 30 years of running this firm, I have never watched someone absorb that kind of public disrespect and respond with that much dignity. You finished your speech, you thanked your team, and you walked out without making a scene. Nate, that's not just professionalism, that's character." I didn't say anything for a second because, and I'm being honest here, that was the first time in probably a year that someone had said something genuinely kind to me without a qualifier, without a joke, without a backhanded twist. Just a straight, sincere compliment from someone I respected about something that mattered. I said, "Thank you, Grace. That means a lot." She said, "Take the day. Come back Tuesday. Your new title will be waiting." I hung up and drank my coffee. The house was quiet. The fridge was still rearranged. The lemon chicken recipe was still in the drawer. But the tension was gone. The needles were gone. The jokes were gone. It was just me and a French press and a house that felt like mine again. Here's what gets me. Not the locks, not the bags on the porch. What gets me is the speech. Nate was standing at a podium in front of the people who shape his career, and the person who was supposed to be cheering louder than anyone tried to burn it down with one sentence. He didn't flinch. He took a breath, said, "Thank you." Walked out with his jacket over his arm like a man leaving a restaurant after a good meal. Most people would have stopped. Most people would have said something back. Nate owned the moment. He just did it quietly. That's the thing about quiet strength. You only notice it when the noise stops. Jess texted me for about 3 days after. The messages followed a predictable pattern. Night 1 was anger. You're overreacting. You can't just lock someone out. Night 2 was deflection. It was a joke, Nate. You're really going to throw away 2 years over one comment? Night 3 was something that looked like remorse, but wasn't. I'm sorry if you felt embarrassed. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. Can we please just talk? I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was trying to punish her, because I genuinely had nothing left to say. Everything I needed to communicate, I communicated with the bags on the porch and the new locks on the doors. Her friend Colleen called me 2 days later and said, Nate, Jess is really upset. She thinks you won't even hear her out. I said, Colleen, I appreciate you calling, but this is between me and Jess, and it's done. Colleen said, don't you think you owe her a conversation? I said, I think she owed me basic respect at a work event, and that didn't happen. Colleen didn't have a response to that. 2 things happened in the following week that I want to mention. First, Liam, the junior coordinator I mentor, stopped by my desk on his first day back and said, Nate, I just want you to know, what happened at the dinner? Nobody in this office thinks less of you. If anything, we all think more of you. He paused and then said, also, I want to apologize for just sitting there. I should have said something. I told him, Liam, it wasn't your situation to manage. You did nothing wrong. He nodded, but I could tell it still bothered him. Good kid. He's going to be a great coordinator someday. Second, Alec told me, quietly, over lunch about a week later, that after I left the dinner, the table went dead silent for about 30 seconds. Then Priya turned to Jess and said, that was really uncalled for. Jess apparently said, oh, come on, it was a joke. And Priya said, and Alec swears this is word for word, nobody at this table is laughing. Jess sat there for another 5 minutes, then grabbed her bag and left. Nobody stopped her. Nobody called after her. Alec said the rest of the evening was actually nice. People came by the table to say congratulations on my behalf. Grace made a point of mentioning me again during the closing remarks. She said, and to Nate, who I hope is listening from wherever he is, we're proud to have you on this team. Alec said a few people got a little emotional at that. I didn't know any of that until Alec told me. Hearing it felt, I don't know, vindicating maybe. I'd spent 2 years wondering if I was being oversensitive. If maybe Jess's comments really were just jokes and I just couldn't take a joke. But when 50 people hear the same thing and nobody laughs, that tells you something. It told me I wasn't crazy. About a week after everything, I was cleaning out the guest bedroom, and I found a notebook Jess had left in the nightstand drawer. One of those journals you buy at a bookstore and write in for 3 days and then abandon. She'd written in about 10 pages. I didn't read it. I put it in a box with a few other things she'd left behind. Earrings, a hoodie, a phone charger. And I mailed the box to Colleen's address with no note. Because even when someone hurts you, you don't read their journal. That's a line I won't cross. My mom called me the weekend after. She'd heard from my sister, who I'd told in a moment of needing to vent. My mom said, Nathan, are you okay? She's the only person who calls me Nathan. I said, I'm good, Mom. She said, I never liked her. I said, you told me you liked her. She said, I lied. Mothers do that. She was mean to you and she thought she was being clever. It's been about 3 weeks now. The house is quiet. I leave my keys on the hook by the door and nobody moves them. I come home from work and nobody asks me why I'm late. I eat dinner and nobody tells me my job is just pushing paper. I sleep through the night. I do miss some things. I miss the lemon chicken. I miss the Sunday fridge rearranging, which makes no sense because it annoyed me when it was happening. But I don't miss the comments. I don't miss the feeling of being small in my own kitchen. I don't miss wondering if tonight's going to be a good night or a needle night. The promotion is official. My name is on the new org chart. I have a team now, 3 coordinators, including Liam. My first project as senior coordinator is a mid-rise residential building on the east side of town. 14 stories, 62 units, 18 months from groundbreaking to occupancy. It's the biggest thing I've ever managed. Grace stopped by my office yesterday and said, how's it feel? I said, like a lot of responsibility. She said, good. That means you're taking it seriously. And Nate, don't ever let anyone tell you that you didn't earn this. I don't hand out promotions as favors. You proved you can handle more. I've thought a lot about what Jess said at that dinner. I've turned it over in my head from every angle, the way I'd examine a set of plans looking for a flaw. And here's what I've concluded. She didn't believe it. She knew it wasn't true. She said it because if my success was real, it made her feel something she didn't want to feel. So she tried to make it not real. She tried to rewrite the story in front of an audience. And the audience didn't buy it. Final update. Jess picked up the rest of her things through Colleen about 10 days after the dinner. No contact between us. Clean break. I heard through the mutual friend who introduced us that she told people I overreacted and threw her out over nothing. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't need to. 50 people were in that room. The story tells itself. Dale the locksmith texted me last week. He said, "Everything holding up with the new locks?" I said, "Perfectly." He said, "Good. Those are commercial grade. Built to last." I said, "That's exactly what I needed." Good guy, Dale. I should send him a Christmas card or something. My Sunday mornings are different now. I make eggs and toast, just for one. I don't rearrange the fridge. The lemon chicken recipe is still in the kitchen drawer. I haven't thrown it away. I probably will eventually, but not yet. Some things take time to let go of, even when you know letting go was the right call. If you're with someone who makes you feel small, not occasionally, not in a bad moment, but consistently, systematically, in front of people who matter to you, that's not love with rough edges. That's something else. And you deserve to recognize it, even if it takes a bag on a porch and a new set of locks to finally see it clearly. So here's my question. Would you have walked out of that dinner? Or would you have said something at the podium? And would you have changed the locks that night or given it another chance? I've gone back and forth on all of it. But every time I come home to a quiet house and an unchanged fridge, I know I made the right call. Look, Nate didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't throw anything. He stood at a podium while his girlfriend tried to dismantle his proudest professional moment in front of every person who mattered to his career, and he said thank you and walked out. Then he went home and executed a plan with the same precision he uses to coordinate buildings. Bags packed, locks changed, done, no drama, no second chances. And his boss called the next morning and told him it was the most dignified thing she'd ever witnessed. That's not a breakup. That's a masterclass in knowing your worth. Drop a comment. Would you have handled it the same way, or would the podium have gotten a very different kind of speech? Subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. What's good, everybody? Today's story is about a guy who spent his entire life watching his parents pour everything into his golden child sister. The attention, the praise, the money, all of it. And he just took it. For 33 years. Then one night at a family dinner, his parents pulled out a $15,000 check for his sister's house down payment. In front of everyone. 3 years after he bought his own house with zero help from them. What happened next was 33 years of silence finally finding a voice. And trust me, when the quiet kid finally speaks up, nobody's ready. Let's get into it. My parents gave my golden child sister $15,000 for a house. When I bought mine 3 years ago, they didn't give me a dime. So I told them exactly what I thought at family dinner. I've been going back and forth on whether to post this because part of me feels like I overreacted, and another part of me knows I didn't. I guess I'll let you guys decide. I'm Nate, 33 years old. I work in operations for a distribution company. Nothing glamorous, but it pays well and I'm good at it. I've been there for 8 years, worked my way up from a floor associate to operations coordinator. I own my house, drive a paid-off truck, and I've never asked anyone for a cent. Not because I'm too proud, but because nobody ever offered. Let me explain my family real quick. My parents, Rick and Diane, have 2 kids, me and my younger sister, Kelsey. Kelsey is 29. Growing up, Kelsey was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets orbiting around her. And look, I'm not saying this with bitterness. I used to be bitter about it. For years. But at some point, you either make peace with it, or you let it eat you. And I chose to make peace. Or I thought I did. Kelsey was smart. She was. Straight A's, honor roll, played violin, did speech and debate, volunteered at the animal shelter. The full golden child resume. My parents put her in private music lessons starting in 3rd grade. They drove her to debate tournaments 3 states away. They paid for SAT prep courses, college application coaches, and a private college that cost about $42,000 a year. They took out loans. They refinanced the house. For Kelsey. And me? I was fine. That's what they always said. Nate's fine. Nate doesn't need anything. Nate handles himself. Which was true, technically. I was a B student. Played baseball in high school. Pretty good, not great. I worked at a hardware store after school from the time I was 15. Bought my own car at 17. Paid for community college myself. Transferred to state school. Graduated with minimal debt because I worked full-time while taking classes. Nobody drove me to tournaments. Nobody hired me a coach. Nobody refinanced anything. And I was fine. I want to be careful here because I don't want to make it sound like my parents were terrible. They weren't. They showed up to my games sometimes. They said they were proud sometimes. My dad taught me to change oil and fix a running toilet. My mom helped me move into my first apartment. They're not monsters. They just have a clear, undeniable, mathematically provable favorite. And it's not me. Quick example that still bugs me. When Kelsey graduated from her private college, my parents threw a party. Rented out a restaurant. Invited 60 people. Custom cake. My mom made a slideshow. When I graduated from state school, summa cum laude, by the way, which they never mention, my dad shook my hand and said, "Good job, bud." That was it. No party, no slideshow. Good job, bud. I could give you 50 more examples. The time Kelsey wanted to study abroad in Italy, and my parents found a way to make it happen. $7,000 they didn't have. The time I wanted to attend a 2-week baseball camp that cost $600, and my dad said, "We just don't have it right now, bud." That same summer, Kelsey got a new violin. I don't know what it cost, but it came in a case that looked like it belonged to a secret agent. Or the time I told my parents I got into state school with a scholarship that covered half my tuition. My mom said, "That's great, honey," and in the same breath started talking about Kelsey's sorority rush. I sat there holding my acceptance letter like a receipt nobody asked for. My dad eventually noticed and said, "We should celebrate. How about pizza this weekend?" We never got that pizza. Kelsey had a debate tournament that Saturday, and they drove her to Indianapolis. The thing that really crystallized it for me was when I was 26. I'd just gotten my first real promotion, from floor associate to shift lead. It came with a raise and a new title. I was excited. I called my parents. My mom answered, and I told her the news. She said, "Oh, that's nice. Hey, quick question. Do you still have that air mattress? Kelsey's friend is visiting, and they need somewhere to sleep." I gave them the air mattress. I never brought up the promotion again. I learned something from all of this. I learned that being the invisible kid teaches you to be self-sufficient in ways that the favored kid never learns. I know how to budget because nobody was going to bail me out. I know how to work because nobody was going to pay my way. I know how to be alone because nobody was going to prioritize me. These aren't complaints. They're facts. And they made me who I am. But that doesn't mean they didn't hurt. Anyway, let's fast forward to the dinner. 3 years ago, I bought my house. It's a 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I saved for the down payment for 4 years. Lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, drove my old truck, packed lunches every day, said no to vacations. When I finally closed, I was proud. Genuinely proud. I called my parents to tell them. My mom said, "That's wonderful, honey. Kelsey just got a promotion, did you hear?" I said congratulations to Kelsey. And that was the extent of the celebration. Nobody offered to help with the down payment. Nobody offered furniture. Nobody even came to see the house for 2 months. When they finally visited, my mom spent most of the time talking about how Kelsey's apartment had better natural light. I made a mental note of that and filed it in the drawer in my brain labeled, "Things that hurt but aren't worth bringing up." Okay, timeout. This is me jumping in, not Nate. I need to highlight something. This man graduated summa cum laude, that's the highest honor, from state school while working full-time. And his dad said, "Good job, bud." Meanwhile, Kelsey gets a custom cake and a rented restaurant for graduating from a college his parents went into debt to pay for. That's not favoritism. That's a 2-tier family membership system. Nate's been on the free trial for 33 years, while Kelsey's had the premium subscription since birth. I'm calling Kelsey the scholarship, because that's what she is. She's a permanent investment that never had to prove ROI. And Nate? Nate's about to collect some emotional dividends. Trust me. So, the dinner. This was 3 weeks ago. Weekly family dinner at my parents' house, which we've been doing on and off for about a year. It was my mom's idea. She said she wanted the family to be closer. I go because it's an hour out of my week, and sometimes my mom makes good pot roast. Her pot roast is legitimately great. That's the one thing I'll give her credit for without reservation. This particular dinner felt different from the start. My mom had set the table with the good plates, the ones she only uses for holidays and when the neighbors come over. There were candles. My dad was wearing a collared shirt, which is unusual for a Tuesday. Kelsey was there with her boyfriend, Bryce, who was fine. He's an accountant. He wears khakis a lot. That's about all I know about Bryce. Dinner started normal. We talked about work. My dad asked Bryce about tax season. My mom talked about her garden. She's been growing tomatoes that aren't doing well, but she's emotionally committed to them at this point. I mentioned I'd gotten a good performance review and was in line for a raise. My mom said, "That's nice." My dad nodded. We moved on. Then Kelsey cleared her throat. She said she and Bryce had been looking at houses. They'd found one they loved, a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood on the other side of town, listed at $380,000. She was excited. Bryce was nodding along like he'd rehearsed his supporting role. My parents were beaming, like physically glowing. My dad had this expression I recognized from Kelsey's graduation party, the "my daughter is exceptional and I need everyone to know" face. And then my mom reached under the table and pulled out an envelope. I knew what it was before she opened it. I could feel it in my chest, that thing where your body figures out what's happening before your brain does. She handed the envelope to Kelsey and said, "Daddy and I want to help you start this chapter." Kelsey opened it. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Bryce. Bryce looked at the check. Kelsey started tearing up and said, "Mom, this is $15,000. My mom was crying too. My dad put his arm around my mom and said, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." $15,000. I sat there. I didn't move. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. Except it was my life. And I'd been watching this exact scene in different forms for 33 years. Let me be clear about what $15,000 means in context. 3 years ago, I scraped together $22,000 for my down payment. 4 years of saving, packed lunches, skipped trips, drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it. And my parents didn't offer a single dollar. Not even, "We'd love to help, but we can't." Nothing. It wasn't a conversation that happened. I bought my house entirely alone. And now Kelsey, who makes good money, whose boyfriend is an accountant, who has had every advantage handed to her since kindergarten, gets 15 grand because she found a house she loved. Pause for a second. For those listening, this is me, not Nate. Let me do some quick math here because I think the numbers tell the story better than I can. Kelsey, private music lessons, private college at 42 grand a year, graduation party at a rented restaurant, and now $15,000 for a house. Nate, community college he paid for himself, state school he worked through, a handshake at graduation, and $22,000 he saved over 4 years of packed lunches. If you graph the parental investment in these two kids over 33 years, it would look like a stock chart where one stock is Tesla and the other is a lemonade stand that the owner also had to build the table for. The scholarship is cashing another check, and Nate is sitting across the table doing mental math on decades of receipts. This is about to blow. I watched this whole scene unfold from my chair, and something happened in my body that I can only describe as a pressure valve failing. You know how in old buildings there's a pipe somewhere that's been holding pressure for years and everyone just assumes it's fine because it's never leaked? That pipe was me. And the $15,000 check was the thing that finally cracked the seal. It wasn't even about the money. I need to be clear about that. If my parents had given me 15 grand when I bought my house and then given Kelsey 15 grand now, I'd have been thrilled. Equal treatment. Fair. Done. But that's not what happened. What happened is they watched me struggle for 4 years to save a down payment, said nothing, did nothing, and then turned around and handed my sister a check with tears of joy like they were awarding her the Nobel Prize in being their favorite. I don't know how long I sat there silently. It felt like 5 minutes. It was probably 30 seconds. Kelsey was hugging my mom. Bryce was shaking my dad's hand. My mom was wiping her eyes. And nobody looked at me. Not once. That's the part that broke something. Not the check. The check was just money. What broke me was the complete unconscious erasure. Like I wasn't in the room. Like my reaction didn't matter because I was never part of this equation. I was furniture. I was the chair at the table that happened to have a person in it. And I know what you're thinking. Just talk to them about it later. Don't make a scene. And yeah, that's probably the mature thing to do. That's probably what a well-adjusted, emotionally intelligent adult would do. But here's the thing. I've been the well-adjusted one my entire life. I've swallowed every slight, filed every hurt in that drawer, nodded along while Kelsey got the spotlight, and I got, that's nice. For 33 years, I've been the low-maintenance kid, the easy one, the one who's fine. I wasn't fine. My mom noticed I'd been quiet and said, "Nate, aren't you happy for your sister?" And I looked at her. I looked at her for a long time. And I said, and I can remember every word because I've replayed it in my head 100 times since. Happy for her? Yeah, Mom, I'm happy for her. I'm always happy for her. I was happy when you threw her a graduation party at a restaurant while Dad shook my hand in the driveway. I was happy when you drove her to tournaments while I took the bus to my games. I was happy when you refinanced the house to pay for her college while I worked 40 hours a week to pay for mine. And now I get to be happy that she's getting $15,000 for a house when you didn't give me a dime for mine. I am just overflowing with happiness right now. The table went dead silent. My mom's face crumbled. My dad's jaw clenched. That thing he does when he's angry but doesn't want to show it. Kelsey looked at me with wide eyes. Bryce studied his fork like it contained the answers to the universe and possibly an escape route. My dad was the first to speak. He said, "Nate, don't do this. Not tonight. This is Kelsey's moment." I said, "It's always Kelsey's moment, Dad. That's the whole problem." The room kind of froze. You know that feeling when everyone in a room holds their breath at the same time? That's what happened. Even Bryce, who normally has the emotional range of a filing cabinet, looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall above the kitchen sink. I could hear my mom's cat, Gerald, scratching at the back door. Yes, they have a cat named Gerald. Kelsey named him. They thought it was adorable. My mom started crying. Full crying. She said, "I don't understand where this is coming from. We've always treated you both the same." And I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes the lie is so big that the only response your body can produce is laughter. We've always treated you both the same. 20 years of evidence to the contrary, sitting in a drawer in my brain, and she actually believes that. I said, "Mom, you haven't treated us the same. You've never treated us the same. And the worst part is you don't even see it. You genuinely don't see it. I've been the easy kid my whole life because I stopped asking for things I knew I wouldn't get. That's not being easy. That's giving up." Kelsey finally spoke. She said, "Nate, I didn't ask for this. I told her I knew, and I meant it. It's not Kelsey's fault our parents have a favorite. She didn't design this system. She just benefited from it. The same way I didn't design it. I just absorbed it. But here's what got me." She said, "Nate, I didn't ask for this." And then she paused and added, "Maybe you should have just asked them for help when you bought your house." Just asked, like it's that simple. Like the kid who never got the party, never got the coach, never got the restaurant, never got the check was supposed to raise his hand and go, "Excuse me, may I please have some of what she's having?" That's not how it works when you've been trained your entire life to expect nothing. You don't ask because you've learned that asking gets you "that's nice" and a subject change. I stood up. I put my napkin on the table. I said, "I love you guys, all of you, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is normal." And I walked out. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, the same hook I'd been using since I was 12, and I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just walked to my truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway that I'd pulled in and out of 10,000 times before. But this time it felt different. Like I was leaving a building I'd been trapped in for a long time and finally found the exit. Wait. Maybe you should have just asked. The scholarship just told the self-funded kid to ask for money. That's like a trust fund baby telling someone who works 3 jobs to just invest in the stock market. The lack of self-awareness is almost impressive. It's like watching someone born on third base tell someone who built the baseball field to just hit a home run. And mom's line, "We've always treated you both the same." That's not a lie. It's a delusion. She's been playing favorites for so long she doesn't even have the receipt anymore. She threw it away with all of Nate's graduation plans. I'm genuinely fired up right now. This man walked out of that dinner with 33 years of composure finally cracking, and honestly, it's about time. I drove home, sat in my driveway for a while, looked at my house, the house I bought by myself, the house nobody helped me buy, and nobody congratulated me for buying, and nobody came to see for 2 months. And I thought, this house is mine. I did this. Nobody handed me an envelope. The drive home was weird. I was shaking a little. Not from anger, from the adrenaline of finally saying something. My whole body was buzzing. I pulled over twice because I couldn't focus on driving. I sat in a gas station parking lot for about 15 minutes just breathing and staring at the dashboard. The truck smelled like my mom's pot roast because she'd given me a container of leftovers as I walked in. Before the check, before everything went sideways. I still had the container on the passenger seat. I ate the pot roast when I got home. It was delicious. Even when your mom breaks your heart, her pot roast still hits. My buddy Connor from work texted me around 10 p.m. asking if I wanted to watch the game that weekend. I typed out a long message about what happened and then deleted it. Wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Just said, yeah, sounds good. That night, I got 3 texts from Kelsey. I'm sorry you feel that way. I love you. I didn't respond. From my mom, you ruined a beautiful evening. I hope you'll apologize to your sister. I didn't respond. From my dad, that was dramatic, Nate. You need to calm down. I didn't respond. I stared at those 3 texts for a long time, read them over and over. I even screenshotted them and sent them to my buddy Connor the next day with no context. He called me immediately and said, "What happened?" I told him. He said, "Dude, your mom told you to apologize to your sister for being upset that they gave your sister money they never gave you?" I said, "Yeah." He was quiet for about 5 seconds and then said, "I'd have flipped the table." I told him I considered it, but the table was too heavy. It wasn't, I just didn't want to ruin the pot roast. Priorities. 3 texts. And in 3 texts, they told me everything I needed to know. Kelsey's sorry I feel that way, not sorry for the disparity. My mom thinks I ruined things. Not that the situation was unfair. My dad thinks I'm being dramatic, after 33 years of being the least dramatic person in the family. I went about a week without talking to any of them. It was the longest I'd gone without contact since I moved out at 20. And it was quiet, not peaceful quiet, more like the quiet after an argument where nobody knows who's supposed to call first. I went to work, I came home, I made dinner, I watched TV, I mowed the lawn on Saturday morning because that's what I do on Saturdays. I lived my normal life while my family was apparently imploding behind the scenes. I found out later from Aunt Patty that the week after the dinner was chaos on their end. My mom was crying daily. My dad was processing by retreating into the garage and working on projects. He's building a set of bookshelves for the den. Has been building them for 3 years. They'll probably never be finished. Kelsey had gone quiet too. Bryce apparently told his parents about what happened at the dinner, and his mom said, "That's exactly why I told you to always carry your own financial weight in a relationship." Bryce did not relay this comment to Kelsey. During that week, my aunt, my mom's sister Patty, called me. She said my mom was devastated and couldn't understand why I was upset. I told Aunt Patty the story. All of it. The graduation party versus the handshake. The college payment versus working full-time. The house check versus nothing. Aunt Patty was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Nate, I've been watching this for years, and I've been wanting to say something, but it wasn't my place." She told me she was proud of me. She also said something that stuck. "Your parents love you, but they admire Kelsey, and they've confused the two." That hit me like a truck. Admire versus love. 2 different things that most people confuse. They love me because I'm their son. But they admire Kelsey. They see themselves in her. They're impressed by her. They invest in her because she reflects well on them. I'm not a reflection. I'm just there. Reliable, low maintenance. Fine. Yo. They love you, but they admire Kelsey. Aunt Patty just delivered the most devastating psychological read I've ever heard from a family member. That's not a burn. That's an autopsy report. She just explained 33 years of favoritism in one sentence. And the thing is, she's been watching it happen the whole time. Everybody saw it. The neighbors saw it. The extended family saw it. The only people who didn't see it were Rick and Diane. Because when you're the ones holding the spotlight, you never notice who's standing in the dark. Nate's been in the dark his whole life, and he just flipped the switch. Whether his parents can handle the light, that's on them. A week and a half after the dinner, my mom showed up at my house, unannounced. She brought banana bread, which felt like a peace offering. It's always banana bread with moms. What is that? We sat at my kitchen table, the table I bought at a thrift store when I first moved in, and refinished myself over a weekend with sandpaper and polyurethane. I got on sale at the hardware store where I used to work as a teenager. Everything in my house has a story like that. The bookshelf was a Craigslist find. The couch was from a coworker who was moving. The kitchen faucet I installed myself after watching a video online. I built this life piece by piece, dollar by dollar. I think that's why the check hit so hard. It wasn't just money. It was the reminder that some people get pieces handed to them while other people have to scavenge. My mom looked around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. Maybe she was. She started talking about how hurt she was, about how she never meant to play favorites, about how she and my dad had just been trying to help Kelsey get on her feet. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. When she was done, I said this. Mom, did you help me get on my feet? She paused. She said, You didn't need help, Nate. You were always so independent. I said, Mom, I wasn't independent. I was ignored. There's a difference. I became independent because I had to be, not because I wanted to be. Every time I needed something, Kelsey needed it more. Every time I achieved something, Kelsey's achievement was bigger. So I stopped needing. And I stopped telling you when I achieved things. And you guys stopped noticing. She cried. We sat there for a long time. She didn't argue, which is the only reason I think there's hope. If she'd argued, I would have known she still didn't get it. But the silence, the long, uncomfortable, years overdue silence, that told me she was finally hearing it. She left after about an hour. At the door, she hugged me and said, I'm going to do better, Nate. I said, I hope so. Final update. That was 3 weeks ago. I want to add one thing about the aftermath that happened between Mom's visit and the next family dinner. I was at the grocery store Tuesday evening doing my usual shop, and I ran into a family friend, Mrs. Keller, who goes to the same church as my parents. She grabbed my arm in the cereal aisle and said, Nate, I heard about what happened. Your mother told me you had an outburst at dinner. I said, Did she tell you what the outburst was about? Mrs. Keller paused. She said you were upset about a gift. I said, She gave Kelsey $15,000 for a house after giving me nothing when I bought mine. Mrs. Keller's face changed. She said, Oh. Then she said, Oh, Nate. And she hugged me in the cereal aisle. I wasn't expecting that. It was the first time an adult in my parents' circle had acknowledged what I'd been feeling. In a grocery store, next to the Cheerios. Life is weird sometimes. We've had one family dinner since. It was awkward. Nobody mentioned the check, the house, or the dinner. Kelsey and I made small talk about a show we both watch. Bryce talked about taxes. My dad asked about my truck. It felt like a first date between people who've known each other for 3 decades. But there were small things. My mom asked about my raise. She asked how the house was doing, if I needed help with anything. She asked about my vegetable garden, which I'd mentioned once in passing months ago and didn't think she'd registered. She remembered, or she's trying to remember now. Either way, it's something. She also offered to bring over some of her tomato plants, the ones from her garden that aren't doing well. I said, sure, we're going to have bad tomatoes together. It's not a rented restaurant or a custom cake, but it's a start. And for the first time in 33 years, it feels like she's trying to see me. Not just love me from a distance, but actually see me. I'll take bad tomatoes over invisibility any day of the week. Oh, one random thing. Bryce sent me a text last week. Just him, not from Kelsey. It said, Hey Nate, just wanted to say I respect what you did. That took guts. I didn't expect that from Bryce. Told you, the accountant is full of surprises. Kelsey and I haven't talked about it privately. I think she's processing. I don't blame her. Finding out you're the favorite isn't as easy as it sounds. It comes with its own guilt. I think she's a good person who grew up in a system that wasn't fair and didn't know it wasn't fair until someone said it out loud. I don't hate her. I never did. I hated the disparity. And now that it's been named, maybe it can start to change. My dad and I had a separate conversation about a week after Mom's visit. He came by under the pretense of checking my furnace filter. He does that sometimes, Dad stuff. We stood in the basement and he said, "Your mom told me what you said about feeling ignored." I said, "Yeah." He was quiet for a while, fiddled with the filter. Then he said, "I didn't know it was that bad, Nate. I thought you were always so..." He trailed off. I said, "I was always so what?" He said, "You were always so okay with everything." And I said, "Dad, I wasn't okay. I just stopped telling you." That one landed. I could see it. He didn't say anything else about it. He put the new filter in, checked the water heater, and said the house was in good shape. Then as he was leaving, he stopped at the door and said, "For what it's worth, your house is better than anything I could have built at your age. You did good, Nate." He didn't say, "Bud." He said, "Nate. Small thing. Big thing. I still have my house, still have my truck, still packing lunches most days, old habits, still nobody's favorite. But I'm not fine anymore. I'm honest. And honestly, that feels better." I spent 33 years being the easy kid, and all it got me was invisibility. Being the honest kid is harder. It's messier. People cry at dinner tables and send you disappointed text messages. But at least they see you. And being seen, even when it's uncomfortable, that's better than being fine. I've been spending more time on the house lately. Fixed a squeaky step on the front porch last weekend. Put up a new mailbox. One of those nice cast aluminum ones. Planted some hostas along the walkway because my coworker said they're impossible to kill, which sounded like my kind of plant. Every improvement I make, I think, I did this. Nobody funded this. Nobody handed me an envelope. And it's mine. Kelsey and Bryce are still house hunting, by the way. I hope they find something good. I mean that. Having your own place changes something in you, even if you had to fight for it. Especially if you had to fight for it. Would you have said something at the dinner? Or would you have pulled your parents aside privately? Part of me wonders if I should have waited. But honestly, Thursday was the night. No, it was a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday, and 33 years of waiting was enough. Look, Nate didn't flip a table. He didn't cuss anyone out. He didn't go nuclear. He just told the truth at a dinner table, and the truth was so uncomfortable that nobody knew what to do with it. That's the power of 33 years of receipts. When you finally read them out loud, the room goes silent. Whether his parents actually change? That's above my pay grade. But the fact that Nate finally said something? That's the win. Sometimes standing up isn't dramatic. It's just overdue. Drop a comment. Would you have spoken up at the dinner or handled it privately? Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. This story is titled, "My Rich Uncle Found Out I Was Living in My Car While Working 2 Jobs to Pay for College, and my cousins were making fun of me to everyone." Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Okay, Reddit, this is going to be a long one. I, 19 female, need to write this down. Because honestly, my head's been spinning with everything that's happened. Really never thought I'd be sharing my life story on here, but whatever, here goes. It all started when my dad got diagnosed with cancer. I was 14, just starting high school, thinking my biggest problem was going to be algebra or something. Dad had been feeling tired for a while, but we thought it was just work stress. You know? Then, one regular Tuesday after school, Mom sat me down in our kitchen and told me he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The next 6 months were like watching a movie of someone else's life. Dad got super sick, super fast, lost all his hair, lost so much weight. His favorite Chicago Bears jersey looked like a tent on him. He tried to keep joking around, still helped me with my math homework even when he could barely sit up. The last thing he said to me was, "Don't let your mom's cooking kill you before I get back," when they took him to the hospital for the last time. That was just so Dad, always trying to make me laugh. He died on a Thursday. I remember because it was supposed to be pizza night. We'd always get a deep dish on Thursdays and had been doing it since I was little. Instead, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room with those stupid flickering fluorescent lights, watching my mom cry into her phone while telling our relatives. I thought that was going to be the worst part of my life. Boy, was I wrong. Mom totally lost it after Dad died. Started dating like 2 months later. Said she needed to feel alive again, or whatever. That's how she met Derek. Rich guy, real estate developer type. He started coming around all the time, bringing Mom fancy gifts, taking her on weekend trips. I tried to be happy for her, I really did. Dad wouldn't want her to be sad forever, right? But then she married Derek less than a year after Dad died. Didn't even tell me they were engaged. I found out when she told me to try on a junior bridesmaid dress she'd already bought. The wedding was at some fancy country club in Newport Beach. All of Derek's rich friends were there, looking at us like we were some charity case Derek had adopted. I spent most of the reception hiding in the bathroom trying not to cry. That's when everything really changed. Mom and Derek moved into his massive house in Newport Beach. We're talking one of those places with a pool and a tennis court. But guess what? There wasn't room for me. Mom said I'd be more comfortable living with Dad's sister, Aunt Lisa, in Chicago. More comfortable for who, Mom? So I got shipped off to Chicago like some package nobody wanted. Aunt Lisa lives in this huge house in Lincoln Park with Uncle Marcus and my cousins Michael, 17 male, and Rebecca, 18 female. We used to be super close when we were kids. They'd come visit every summer, and we'd spend weeks making up stupid games and building blanket forts. But man, everything was different once I actually moved in. Suddenly, I wasn't their fun summer cousin anymore. I was this unwanted extra person in their house. They started acting like I was taking up their space, eating their food, breathing their precious air or something. Michael would accidentally knock over my stuff all the time. Rebecca would make these little comments about how her clothes were too nice to lend me when I first got there and didn't have winter stuff. Aunt Lisa was the worst, though. Made it super clear I was a burden. Started charging me rent even though I was still in high school. Who even does that? The really messed up part? Mom just stopped calling. Like, completely. She'd send money sometimes, not enough to actually cover the rent Aunt Lisa charged. But that was it. When I tried calling her, she was always too busy with her new life. Too busy at yoga. Too busy at charity events. Too busy to talk to her own kid. I'd see pictures on Facebook of her and Derek on vacation in Europe, at fancy parties, living this whole other life where I didn't exist. She even archived all our old family photos, the ones with Dad and me, said they didn't match her new profile aesthetic, like I was just some old furniture that didn't go with her new decor. I started having these dreams when I was back in our old kitchen, where everything was normal. Now I would wake up crying in this weird bedroom at Aunt Lisa's house, staring at these fancy wallpapers that cost more than my whole wardrobe, feeling like I'd lost both parents instead of just one. So after that first month at Aunt Lisa's, she hits me with this rent increase because of property taxes or whatever. I'm like, I'm 15? But okay, guess I need a job. That's when my cousin Rebecca oh so helpfully tells me about this 24-hour laundromat that's hiring in what she calls the sketchy part of Chicago. It's this rundown building wedged between a closed-down dollar store and this super sus phone repair shop that I'm pretty sure never actually repairs any phones. The owner, this old guy named Jerry, takes one look at me and goes, "You're way too young to work midnight shift." But then I told him I could start that night and wouldn't complain about the pay. And suddenly my age wasn't such a big deal anymore. So my life became this crazy schedule that honestly still gives me anxiety thinking about it. Midnight to 6 a.m. at the laundromat, where I had to deal with the weirdest people you can imagine. The worst part wasn't even the weird customers. It was how cold that place got. The heating barely worked, and Chicago winters are no joke. I'd wear like 3 hoodies just to survive my shift. Never put that in the job description, did they? But one job wasn't enough to cover Aunt Lisa's rent, plus basic stuff like, food and school supplies. So I also started working at this gas station called From 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is where my dear cousins decided to make my life extra fun. See, Quick Stop was right by their fancy private school, where tuition probably cost more than I made in a year. Michael and his friends thought it was hilarious to come in during my shifts and just trash the place. They'd knock over the chip displays I just organized, spill their Slurpees accidentally all over the floor, leave opened bags of beef jerky everywhere. Rebecca was worse, though. She was sneakier about it. She'd come in with her cheerleader friends, and they'd do this thing where they'd talk super loud about me like I wasn't there. Oh my God, can you imagine having to work here? Like I'd literally die. Or, "Ew, look at her uniform, it's so polyester." Then they'd take these awful pictures of me trying to clean up their messes and post them on their social media. The school stuff got bad too. I was going to the public high school nearby, and somehow Rebecca made sure everyone there knew about my jobs. People started leaving quarters on my desk for laundry. Someone stuck a name tag on my locker that said, "Washer Girl." Real creative, guys. Thanks. I was basically sleeping through all my classes, because who can stay awake when you're working from midnight to 6 a.m., trying to do homework from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., then working again from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m.? My grades started dropping. Teachers kept asking if everything was okay at home. I just told them I was adjusting to the move. The only good thing about the laundromat job was this homeless guy named Pete who'd come in most nights. He wasn't like the other weird customers. He showed me how to fix the quarter machine when it got stuck and taught me which customers were okay to let slide when they were a quarter short. One night, Pete tells me, "Kid, you're living life on expert mode right now." Made me laugh for the first time in weeks. He disappeared when winter hit bad. I still worry about what happened to him sometimes. Uncle Marcus owned the building, but I never saw him there. He had this property management company handle everything. Sometimes I'd see these fancy cars drive by real slow late at night. Later found out he'd send people to check on the place. Guess he was watching me more than I knew. Meanwhile, Mom's sending these random texts like, "Hope you're doing well," but never actually picking up when I called. Her Instagram was full of pictures from Derek's yacht parties and charity galas. Must be nice having so much time for charity when your own kid's working 2 jobs to survive. Aunt Lisa kept finding reasons to raise the rent. Utilities went up. HOA fees increased. Your room is prime real estate. Like, yeah, I'm sure that converted storage room in the basement with the weird mushrooms growing in the corner is really prime Chicago real estate. I started hiding cash in this old teddy bear Dad gave me before he died. Had this whole plan that once I saved enough, I'd get my own place. But every time I got close to a decent amount, something would come up. School fees. Winter boots when my old ones fell apart. That time, Michael accidentally backed his car into mine, and I had to pay for repairs myself. But the final straw came one day when I came home from my gas station shift and found my room completely torn apart. The bear was ripped open, stuffing everywhere. And guess what? All my savings gone. Rebecca swore she was just cleaning and had no idea about any money. Yeah, right. That same week, Aunt Lisa comes down to my basement room and tells me rent's going up again. Not just a little, we're talking double. Said something about property values in the area increasing. I did the math and realized even with both jobs, I couldn't afford it anymore. But here's the thing. I'd been taking classes at this community college nearby. Nothing fancy, just basic requirements, trying to get ahead while still in high school. The counselor there said I could maybe get financial aid if I took more classes. That meant I had to make a choice. Keep paying Aunt Lisa's crazy rent or try to get an education. So I picked education. Didn't really have a plan, just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Packed up what could fit in my Toyota. The car had these weird rust spots all over it, and the heat only worked if you kicked the dashboard in exactly the right spot. But it was mine. First night sleeping in that car was actually kind of peaceful. Parked behind the laundromat, used my work keys to sneak in and use the bathroom. Had this whole setup. Reclined the driver's seat all the way back, used my work backpack as a pillow, layered like 5 blankets I'd borrowed from the lost and found box. Thought to myself, this isn't so bad. Then winter hit. Real Chicago winter. The kind where your spit freezes before it hits the ground. My car's battery started dying because of the cold, so I couldn't run the heat much. The hardest part wasn't even the cold or the lack of sleep. It was trying to look normal at school. Like, try explaining to your chemistry teacher why your homework's all wrinkled and smells like laundry detergent. Or why you're wearing the same 3 outfits over and over. The school counselor kept trying to talk to me, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I live in my car, but don't worry. It's parked in a really nice alley. Then my dear cousin Michael decided to play detective. Guess he got suspicious about why I wasn't around the house anymore. Followed me one night after my laundromat shift. Next day, their TikTok had this whole video series called My Homeless Cousin, a Documentary. They filmed everything. My frost-covered windows, me trying to study using the light from the laundromat sign, even caught me changing clothes in the back seat once. The videos went viral in their rich kid circle. People started driving by the laundromat at night, honking their horns, throwing stuff at my car. The cops started coming around more too. Every couple of nights, there'd be a knock on my window. "Can't sleep here, miss." So I'd drive around until they left, then come back. Spent a lot of nights just driving in circles, watching my gas gauge get lower and lower, praying I'd have enough to get to work the next day. You know what's weird though? I started noticing this black SUV parked across the street some nights. Always in a different spot, but always there. Tinted windows. Engine running. First thought it was cops or maybe some creep, but they never bothered me. Just sat there like they were watching. The temperature dropped to minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit one night. The kind of cold that makes your eyes hurt. My car wouldn't start, phone was dead, and the laundromat was closed for repairs. Thought, well, this is it. This is how I die. They're gonna find me frozen like those rats in the alley. Wrapped myself in every piece of clothing I owned and tried to think warm thoughts. That's when someone knocked on my window. I looked up and there's Uncle Marcus, standing in the snow like it's totally normal to be out at 2 a.m. in Arctic temperatures. He just goes, I think we need to talk. Turns out the black SUV, that was his. He'd been watching me through the laundromat security cameras for weeks, sending people to check on me. Said he wanted to see what I was made of. Who does that kind of messed up test? But honestly, at that point, I was too cold to care about his weird teaching methods. So there I was, basically turning into a human popsicle in my car, and Uncle Marcus is just standing there in his expensive wool coat, looking at me through the window. I'm thinking he's gonna lecture me or call the cops or something. Instead, he says, my office has better heating. Like this is some totally normal situation. His office was this small room above the laundromat I'd never been in before. Turns out he had this whole private space up there. Desk, mini fridge, coffee maker, even a little bathroom. While I'm defrosting my fingers around this cup of actually good coffee, he just sits there watching me like he's trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he goes, you know, your dad and I used to sleep in a car too. Which, what? I almost dropped my coffee. See, I'd always known Uncle Marcus as this crazy rich real estate guy who wore suits that probably cost more than my car. But then he starts telling me this story I never knew. Apparently him and my dad grew up super poor. Like their mom worked 3 jobs and they still couldn't afford rent most months, kind of poor. Uncle Marcus pulls out his phone and shows me this ancient photo of 2 skinny teenagers sitting in a van, eating beans straight from the can. That's your dad on the left, he says. And yeah, same goofy smile I remembered, just on a much younger face. The whole time he's telling me this story, I'm sitting there trying to process it. Like, how did they go from homeless teenagers to, well, this? That's when he tells me about the laundromat. The original owner used to let them hang out inside during really cold nights. They'd help him fix machines, clean up, whatever needed doing. When the owner got sick, he offered to sell them the place. Dad had just started college on a scholarship, but Uncle Marcus had been working construction and saving every penny. So the owner sold it to him for basically nothing. That was his first property. Then he starts pulling out all these old documents from his desk, property deeds, contracts, business plans, all with my dad's notes in the margins. When your dad got sick, Uncle Marcus continues, he made me promise 2 things. First, to look out for you. Second, to make sure you learned how to look out for yourself. Then he gives me this look and goes, gotta say, you're doing better at the second part than I expected. I'm sitting there trying not to cry, failing pretty badly at it TBH, when he drops the real surprise. Turns out he owns like half the block around the laundromat now. Apartment buildings, stores, even that sketchy phone repair place. And he's been watching me through the security cameras this whole time, sending his guys in the SUV to keep an eye on me. You worked 2 jobs without complaining, kept your grades up, found ways to survive that most people wouldn't think of, even kept that laundromat running better than the manager I hired. He actually smiled when he said that last part. Jerry told me you fixed the quarter machine. Took my maintenance guy 3 tries to figure that out. That's when he pulls out this key. Says it's for the apartment above his office. A whole studio apartment I didn't even know existed. He told me it's mine. No rent, as long as I keep working at the laundromat and keep my grades up. I tried to say no. Like, this felt too much like charity or something, but he shut that down real quick. This isn't charity. This is an investment. You've got your father's brains and your own kind of determination. I'm investing in that. Then he shows me this whole file he's kept. Copies of my school records, work reports from Jerry, even screenshots of those awful TikToks Michael and Rebecca made. They thought they were shaming you, he says. All I saw was someone who refused to break. It's weird, you know? All this time I thought he was this cold rich guy who didn't care, who let his wife treat me like garbage. Turns out he was testing me. Messed up way to do it, yeah, but I kind of get it now. He wanted to see if I had what my dad had. That thing that makes you keep going when everything's against you. Before I left his office that night, he said something else about Dad. Told me about their last conversation, when Dad was in the hospital. Dad made him swear not to just hand me everything, said I needed to learn to be strong on my own first. But, Uncle Marcus added, he also said to know when enough was enough. And kid, you've more than proved yourself. I spent that night in a real bed for the first time in months. The apartment wasn't fancy, just one room with a kitchenette and bathroom, but it was warm, clean, safe. But the morning after Uncle Marcus gave me the apartment, I woke up to my phone blowing up with text from Aunt Lisa. Turns out Michael had driven by the laundromat on his way to school and saw me walking down from the upstairs apartment. He took pictures, because of course he did. Aunt Lisa shows up at the laundromat during my shift, wearing her designer workout clothes and looking like she's about to explode. Starts screaming about how I'm trying to steal her husband, how I've been seducing him or whatever. Like, yeah, Aunt Lisa, I totally seduced him by being homeless and fixing washing machines. Super sexy. The customers were all staring, and this one old lady who comes in every Wednesday to wash her cat's blankets actually started recording the whole thing on her phone. Aunt Lisa's saying all this crazy stuff about how she always knew I was trouble, how I'm just like my mother, trying to take advantage of rich men. I'm just standing there with a mop in my hand, wearing my gross work uniform, thinking, is this really happening right now? Then Jerry comes out from the back room and tells Aunt Lisa she needs to leave before he calls the cops. She leaves, but not before telling me this isn't over. That night, I heard Lisa and Uncle Marcus having this huge fight upstairs in his office. Their voices were muffled, but I could make out Aunt Lisa screaming about that girl and how dare you. I felt so ashamed, like I'd ruined their marriage or something. Found out later Aunt Lisa slept at her friend's house that night. When I saw Uncle Marcus the next morning, he had dark circles under his eyes and just gave me this tired nod. But the weird thing is that my mom suddenly started calling me for the first time in months, acting all concerned. Honey, I'm hearing some disturbing things. Like she had any right to be concerned after abandoning me. I'm sure that someone, probably Rebecca, sent her the rumors. Then she and Derek show up at my apartment unannounced. Mom's wearing one of her new designer outfits. Her eyes scan my tiny studio apartment. Oh, honey, she says, but it sounds more calculating than concerned. This is quaint. Derek stays by the door like he's afraid poverty might be contagious. What are you doing here? I ask, not offering them a seat. There's nowhere to sit anyway, unless they want to join me on my unmade bed. Mom starts pacing my tiny space. We've been hearing things about you and your Uncle Marcus. The way she says it makes something twist in my stomach. What about Uncle Marcus? Come on, sweetie. She tries for a conspiratorial smile. I know what you're doing. It's clever, really. I would have never thought of it at your age. Thought of what? Getting close to Marcus like this. Working in his business. Playing the poor abandoned niece. I'm sure he's promised you quite a bit. The realization hits me like a slap. You think I'm trying to get his money? Well, aren't you? Living in this place, working in that laundromat, spending all that time with him, it's obvious what you're doing. I laughed, and it comes out harsh. Obvious to who? You? The woman who shipped me off to Chicago and forgot about me? That's not fair. No, you know what's not fair? You disappeared when Dad died. You married Derek, what, 10 months later? Sent me to Aunt Lisa's like I was some old furniture that didn't match your new decor? I was grieving, she says, but she's looking at her expensive watch, not at me. You were upgrading, I snapped back. Trading up for a fancier life with your real estate husband and your charity galas. And now what? You're worried I might get some of Uncle Marcus's money before you do? Derek steps forward then, all fake authority. Now listen here, young lady. Your mother and I are concerned about your welfare. My welfare? The laugh bubbles up again, uglier this time. Where was this concern when Aunt Lisa was charging me rent at 15, when I was working 2 jobs and sleeping in my car? Mom waves her hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic. Lisa would never... Check my hospital records from when I got bronchitis sleeping in that car. Check the pay stubs from the gas station and the laundromat. Check the rent receipts Lisa made me keep. Oh, wait. You can't. You were too busy posting pictures from your yacht parties to even answer my calls. That's ancient history, Mom says. But she's fidgeting with her wedding ring. Dad's wedding ring that she had upgraded with bigger diamonds. We're here to help now. Derek has a friend who runs this wonderful boarding school in Switzerland. Now you want to help? My voice rises. Or did you just find out Uncle Marcus is teaching me about the business? Worried I might actually learn something? Get a piece of what you think should be yours? Mom's face changes then, gets harder. Drops the concerned mother act completely. Marcus was your father's brother. Anything of his should go to me, his wife, ex-wife, I correct, who remarried less than a year after he died. I deserve, she starts, but I cut her off. You deserve? Dad helped build this business. He and Uncle Marcus started with nothing. While you're busy planning charity galas with Derek, I'm learning how to fix washing machines and manage books and actually help people, just like Dad did. Your father was a teacher, she spits out. He played around with Marcus's business like it was some hobby. Get out, I point to the door. Go back to your perfect life with your perfect husband. Go plan another charity gala. Go archive some more family photos because they don't match your aesthetic. Just get out of my apartment. Derek tries one more time. Now see here. No, you see here. I'm surprised by how steady my voice is now. I know exactly why you're both here. You heard I was working with Uncle Marcus and got scared. Scared I might actually earn something you think should be yours. But here's the thing. I'm not you. I'm not here for anyone's money. I'm here because Uncle Marcus gave me a chance when you threw me away. Mom's face goes red. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you come here pretending to care about my welfare when all you care about is your bank account? I walk to the door and open it. By the way, Mom, that pantsuit makes you look desperate. They leave, Mom muttering something about ingratitude, and Derek already on his phone. I close the door and slide down against it, shaking. Through the thin walls, I hear Mom's voice. I told you this would happen. That little gold digger is going to try to take everything. So after the whole drama with Mom and Derek showing up, things got weirdly quiet for like a week. I was at work one night when Michael came running into the laundromat. He looked scared. Turns out he was using Aunt Lisa's iPad. A message popped up from someone saved as D that just said, "Everything's ready for next week. Lisa, baby, we're finally going to be free." Michael, being the nosy kid he is, opened the messages. Guess Aunt Lisa never logged out of her accounts on that iPad. Y'all, the D was Derek. As in my stepdad Derek. As in my mom's husband Derek. They'd been texting for months. Michael found all these emails too. Plans for them to take a bunch of money from Uncle Marcus's business and run away together. They'd been planning it for almost a year. Every time Aunt Lisa raised my rent, that money went straight into some secret account. Michael showed up because he didn't know what to do. For the first time in his life, this kid who'd made fun of me being poor was realizing his mom was about to steal everything and leave him behind. I called Uncle Marcus. Not gonna lie, part of me wanted to just let everything blow up. After how they treated me, would have been some nice karma. Uncle Marcus came down to the laundromat right away. Michael was still shaking when he showed Uncle Marcus all the messages. I've never seen Uncle Marcus look so blank, like his face just shut down. He made some calls. Turns out his lawyer had been suspicious about some business accounts for a while. The numbers weren't adding up, but Aunt Lisa handled all the paperwork. Uncle Marcus trusted her with everything, so nobody looked too close. The lawyer looked through every account, every transaction. Know how much they were planning to steal? $4.3 million. They'd already moved almost $1 million to offshore accounts. All those times Aunt Lisa complained about property taxes and utility bills, she was stealing that money too. But the real blow? Some of that money came from Michael and Rebecca's college funds. Their own mom was stealing their future to run away with my stepdad. Uncle Marcus had this whole team of lawyers and accountants come in. They found all these fake companies Aunt Lisa had set up. She'd write checks to these companies for maintenance or supplies, but the money just went to more secret accounts. While all this was happening, Aunt Lisa was acting totally normal. Still posting her workout selfies on Instagram, still running her PTA meetings, still pretending to be this perfect rich mom. Derek was the same, taking my mom to charity events, buying her expensive stuff, playing the devoted husband. The lawyers said we needed to wait, get more evidence before confronting them. But Rebecca found everything on the iPad too. She came to my apartment one night, mascara all over her face from crying, asking if she could stay with me. First time in her life she didn't have a perfect place to sleep. It was weird having her there. This girl who'd made fun of me for being homeless was now basically homeless herself. She couldn't stand being in the same house as Aunt Lisa after learning everything. She slept on my tiny futon, used my cheap shampoo, wore my Target clothes, kept saying sorry for how she treated me. But honestly, watching her realize money doesn't make you a good person was enough. Uncle Marcus had his IT guys tracking all the accounts, watching every transaction. The plan was to catch them right before they tried to run. But Aunt Lisa must have figured out something was up, because she started moving money faster. The next morning was Michael's 18th birthday party. Aunt Lisa had planned this huge thing at their house, hired a DJ, catering, even got some mini golf set up in the backyard. She was acting extra nice to everyone, probably because she thought it was her last weekend there. Uncle Marcus decided that was when we'd confront them, have all the evidence ready, get everybody in one place. I remember Rebecca asking if we should warn my mom first, but Uncle Marcus said no. We needed to see her genuine reaction to know if she was involved. The morning of Michael's birthday party was weird. Like, super weird. Aunt Lisa's running around arranging centerpieces and checking the catering while literally planning to disappear with my stepdad the next day. Rebecca and I were helping set up, both knowing everything was about to explode, trying to act normal. Michael looked like he was going to throw up every time his mom hugged him. Uncle Marcus had this whole plan. His lawyer would show up unexpectedly with some urgent paperwork during the party. They'd gather everyone in the living room and then drop all the evidence. The FBI was actually waiting nearby. Yeah, actual FBI agents. Because apparently stealing millions from legitimate businesses while planning to flee the country is kind of their thing. My mom showed up early, all excited about the party. She hadn't talked to me since the whole Switzerland boarding school thing, but she was acting like everything was fine. Derek came in behind her, carrying this huge wrapped present. Found out later it was some fancy gaming system. Guess he was trying to buy Michael's silence or something. The party started at 2 p.m. All these rich kids from Michael's school showing up in BMWs and Mercedes their parents bought them. The DJ's playing music. People are swimming in the pool. Everything looks completely normal. Except Rebecca, Michael, and I are just watching Aunt Lisa and Derek, who keep checking their phones and whispering to each other. Around 4 p.m., the lawyer showed up. He's carrying this thick folder and looking super serious. Aunt Lisa's face when she saw him. I wish I had a picture. She knew they gathered everyone in the living room. Some of Michael's friends tried to stay, but Uncle Marcus was like family only, in this voice that made them leave real quick. My mom was complaining about interrupting the party, but then the lawyer started laying out documents on the coffee table. Bank statements, emails, transfer records, pictures of Aunt Lisa and Derek together from some private investigator. With each paper he put down, the room got quieter. Then he played a recording. Aunt Lisa and Derek talking about their plans, laughing about how stupid everyone was for not noticing. My mom stopped breathing when she heard Derek's voice. Just straight up froze. Aunt Lisa tried to say the recording was fake, but then Uncle Marcus pulled out her iPad, the one Michael found the messages on, started reading their texts out loud. Y'all! The screaming that happened next. Mom launched herself at Derek, started hitting him with her purse, which had like a million metal things in it BTW. Aunt Lisa tried to run for the door, but the FBI guys were already there. Some agent lady just goes, "Lisa Anderson, you're under arrest for wire fraud and embezzlement." They took them both away in handcuffs. Derek kept yelling about how he had a good explanation. Aunt Lisa was crying about how we'd ruined her life. But you know what the worst part was? Neither of them even looked at their kids. Like, your son's 18th birthday party just got turned into a crime scene and you can't even say sorry? Mom had a complete breakdown. Like, full-on hysterics. Turns out Derek had been using her money too. She'd signed a bunch of papers without reading them because she trusted him, she said, and he'd basically stolen everything she had left from Dad's life insurance. The next few weeks were crazy. The FBI investigation found even more stuff. Aunt Lisa and Derek had been planning this for over a year. They had fake passports, offshore accounts, this whole secret life ready to go. They'd stolen from pretty much everyone, the business, the kids' college funds, even charity money from those fancy events they were always going to. While all this was happening, Uncle Marcus was watching how everyone handled it. Rebecca and Michael basically moved into my tiny apartment. We had this whole system. Michael slept on the futon, Rebecca shared my bed, and we all shared one bathroom, which was interesting. They both got jobs at the laundromat. Rebecca's actually really good with customers when she's not being mean to them. And Michael? Kid's got a talent for fixing machines. He figured out this problem with the industrial dryer that even the repair guy couldn't fix. Mom went to rehab. Not for drugs or anything, just to deal with everything. She'd been so focused on looking perfect, having the perfect rich life, that she'd ignored all the red flags about Derek. Uncle Marcus really stepped up. He's been teaching us all about the business. Says he wants us, me, Rebecca, and Michael, to run it together someday. We each have different strengths. I'm good with numbers like my dad was, Rebecca's great with people when she tries, and Michael's got this weird genius thing with machines. Last week, we all went to visit Dad's grave. First time we'd been there together. Uncle Marcus told us more stories about him, about how he'd helped build this whole business while still being a teacher, because he believed in helping people. Aunt Lisa and Derek are in jail now. Turns out stealing millions and planning to flee the country is kind of illegal. They're both trying to blame each other, which would be funny if it wasn't so sad. Michael and Rebecca still struggle with it. Like, imagine finding out your mom cared more about running away with someone else's husband than she did about you. But you know what's weird? We're actually better now. Like all of us. Mom's dealing with her issues instead of hiding them behind designer sunglasses. Rebecca and Michael learned what it's like to actually work for things. I learned that sometimes letting people help you isn't a weakness. Sometimes I look around at my life now and can't believe how different everything is from a year ago. Like, I'm sitting here in the laundromat office, my office now, I manage the place, and it hits me. Although I lost my family, I'm doing much better now. TLDR. Found out aunt and stepdad were secret lovers planning to steal millions and run away. They got arrested at a birthday party. Mom had a breakdown, went to rehab, cousins learned humility through laundry, and we all somehow became a real family. Also, Dad was playing 4D chess from beyond the grave. Kicked out at 16 for my entitled twins pregnancy, now they want to move in with me. I always knew I was unwanted, and I'm not saying that in the whole, oops, I was an accident way. I mean, my parents actually said they wish they only had one kid, my twin sister. Yeah, they straight up told me that they only wanted her, and I was like some bonus they never asked for. Pretty messed up, right? So, growing up, it was like I was living in someone else's family. My sister, let's call her Sarah, was the star of the show. She was everything they ever wanted, and they made sure she knew it too. She had her own room, decorated all nice with pink curtains, a Disney bedspread, and shelves full of every toy you could imagine. She was like the little princess of the house, while I was basically the extra in the background. My room? It was this tiny space with an old bed that squeaked every time I moved and a dresser that had probably been around since the 70s. Every morning was like a slap in the face. I'd wake up, hear my parents talking about how they couldn't wait to buy Sarah new clothes or take her to gymnastics or whatever, and meanwhile, I was left to figure out what I was going to do with my day. It's like they never noticed I was even there. And if they did, it was just to tell me to stay out of the way. I'd get, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" So often it felt like it was my name. It wasn't just at home either. School was no escape. I remember this one time at parent-teacher conferences, they spent the whole time gushing over Sarah's finger paintings like she was Picasso. Meanwhile, my teacher handed them my report card, and they didn't even look at it. It was like it didn't exist. I was busting my butt to do well in school, thinking that maybe, just maybe, if I got good enough grades, they'd pay attention to me. But it was pointless. Sarah was the golden child, and I was just there. I mean, she got everything, the nice clothes, the attention, even first dibs on food at dinner. She had this closet full of new outfits for every season. Meanwhile, my wardrobe was basically hand-me-downs from cousins I didn't even know. I swear some of those shirts were older than I was. And every Christmas and birthday, it was the same story. Sarah would get showered with gifts while I got, like, one or two things. Just enough so they could say they got me something. I'd sit there watching her open her presents while I faked a smile, pretending like it didn't bother me. But it did. It wasn't just about the stuff either. I mean, yeah, having nice clothes or new toys would have been cool, but it was the little things that hit the hardest. Sarah's toys were like sacred relics. If I so much as touched one of her dolls, she'd scream, and my parents would come running. It didn't matter if I was just looking at it, it was always my fault. I'd get scolded for not respecting her space or being careless. It was like they saw me as some sort of threat to her happiness. And mealtimes, man, those were rough. Sarah would always get first pick of everything. Biggest slice of pizza, the best cut of chicken, whatever. I'd get the leftovers. And if I complained, my mom would shoot me this look and say, "Be grateful you're getting anything at all." Like I was some outsider they were doing a favor for by even feeding me. The only person who made me feel seen was my grandfather. He was different. He didn't treat me like I was invisible. I'd go over to his place on weekends and he'd take me fishing or just sit on the porch and tell me stories about his own childhood. He made me feel like I was worth something, you know? Like I wasn't just the unwanted twin. For those few hours each week, I felt like a normal kid, not some tag-along nobody wanted. But then he got sick. Cancer. And even then, it was like my parents tried to shut me out of it. They'd take Sarah to visit him, bring her flowers to give him, but I was always told to stay home. They said it was because they needed me to help out around the house, which was BS. It was just another reminder that in their eyes, I didn't belong. I'd sneak out and visit him on my own. We'd talk, and he'd try to cheer me up, telling me how strong I was and how proud he was of me for sticking it out. But I could tell he was worried. When he passed away, it was like the one good thing in my life got ripped away. I remember my parents didn't even ask if I was okay. They were too busy making sure Sarah was dealing with it all right, like she was the only one who'd lost someone. At the funeral, they had her standing at the front with them, while I was shoved to the back, almost like they were embarrassed to be seen with me. I felt more alone than I ever had before. After my grandfather's death, things got even worse. All the little bits of attention I used to get, like the occasional good job if I did something around the house, disappeared completely. It was like I was fading away, becoming this ghost in my own home. I'd sit at the dinner table and my parents would talk to Sarah like I wasn't even there. Family photos? Let's just say there's a great collection of my elbow or the back of my head. I'm pretty sure if someone looked through our family album, they wouldn't even know I existed. The resentment started to eat away at me. I'd try to stand up for myself sometimes, like when my sister got another new dress, and I'd ask why I never got anything new. But my mom would just brush me off, saying, "Well, Sarah's got her activities and events, and you're fine with what you have." And if I kept pushing, I'd get yelled at for being selfish or making everything about me. So I learned to keep my mouth shut. I became really good at blending in, staying out of sight so I wouldn't have to hear those words again. But even when I tried to disappear, it didn't stop the comments. My dad especially had this way of looking at me like I was a problem that needed fixing. He'd say things like, "You need to shape up, son. Why can't you be more like your sister?" It was like he genuinely believed I was the one screwing up by just existing. And of course, Sarah was all too happy to play into that. Anytime she wanted something, she'd turn on the waterworks, and my parents would rush to her side. I learned pretty quick that it didn't matter what I did. I was never going to be their favorite. That's the thing about growing up feeling unwanted. It starts to mess with your head. You start believing maybe you really are the problem. I spent years trying to figure out what was wrong with me, why I couldn't just be the son they wanted. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, wishing I could disappear and make things easier for them. Because that's what they made me feel like I was just making their lives harder by being around. Looking back now, I can see how toxic all of that was. But when you're a kid, you don't know any better. You just want to be loved and accepted. And when you don't get that, you blame yourself. I was convinced that if I could just be better, be quieter, or try harder, maybe one day they'd finally see me. But they never did. I turned 16 thinking, all right, I'm halfway to getting out of this place. I was counting down the days until I could legally get out of there and make something of myself. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. I always knew my family favored my sister. But what happened next still felt like a slap in the face. It's one thing to be treated like you don't belong, but it's a whole other level when they just shove you out the door. So Sarah got pregnant at 16. Yep, 16 years old and already playing house. And who was the dad? Some 19-year-old guy who barely graduated high school, working dead-end jobs. The kind of guy that makes you wonder if he even knows what responsibility means. When my parents found out, I thought there was going to be a serious talk about consequences and how her life was going to change. But nah, they acted like she'd brought home a medal or something. They were actually excited. Like, weirdly excited. It was all about how our little girl is growing up and we're going to be grandparents. I was standing there thinking, are we in the same reality here? They threw together this shotgun wedding for Sarah and her boyfriend. I swear it was so fast you'd think they were trying to break a record. One day, I'm sitting in my room, which I spent most of my time in because it was safer that way. And the next, they're telling me to get dressed because we're going to a wedding. No one even asked me if I was cool with this whole thing. Not that my opinion ever mattered, but it just felt like the biggest joke. And then, a couple weeks later, the real bomb dropped. My mom calls me downstairs, and she's got this smile on her face that I've learned over the years to hate. It's the same one she uses when she's about to say something she knows I'm not going to like. She starts talking about how, with Sarah's new baby coming, they're going to need more space. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, why are you telling me this? And that's when she drops it. We need your room for the baby. I was stunned. My room? The one place that was actually mine, even if it was the smallest, crappiest room in the house? The only space where I could pretend for 5 minutes that everything was fine? I tried to argue, like, what am I supposed to do then? And my mom just shrugs and says, you're old enough to figure it out. She actually told me I should be grateful they let me stay there as long as they did. I was 16. How was I supposed to figure it out on my own? I didn't have anywhere to go and they knew it. But they didn't care. They just needed to make room for the precious grandchild, and I was the easiest one to get rid of. I remember my dad just standing there with his arms crossed, backing up my mom like he always did. He goes, look, you're a young man now. It's time you start taking responsibility for yourself. As if it was totally normal to kick your teenage kid out because your golden child decided to play grown-up. So that night, I packed my stuff, well, what little I had. It wasn't much. A couple bags of clothes, some books, and a few things my grandfather gave me before he passed. I remember looking around my room one last time, thinking about how it wasn't much, but at least it was mine. Now it was going to be a nursery for my sister's kid, and I was out on the street. I tried asking them where I was supposed to go, but they just shrugged it off. "We're sure you'll figure something out," my dad said. And my mom added, "We're doing this for your sister. She needs us right now." I wanted to scream, "What about me? When have you ever needed me?" But I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd already made up their minds, and I was just an inconvenience standing in the way of their happy family fantasy. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed an old tent from the garage and set it up in the backyard. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The nights were cold and the ground was hard, but at least I was close enough to the house to hear them. Not that it made me feel any better. I could hear them having dinner, laughing, planning for the baby. It was like I was some stray dog they'd put outside, close enough to keep an eye on, but far enough not to be a bother. Winter hit, and that's when things got really bad. I'd try to bundle up with everything I had, but it still felt like the cold seeped into my bones. I used a flashlight to do my homework because, believe it or not, I was still trying to keep up with school. I'd sit there with 3 layers on, shivering while trying to read my textbooks. But my grades started slipping. It was hard to focus on algebra when you're freezing and wondering if you'll even make it through the night. And of course, my parents didn't notice. They were too busy redecorating my old room and making everything perfect for Sarah's new family. I was just the ghost outside, the one they didn't have to worry about anymore. I remember looking in the kitchen window sometimes, watching them eat and talk like everything was fine. Like I wasn't just a few feet away struggling to keep warm and pretending I didn't care. I tried finding odd jobs to save up some money, mowing lawns, shoveling snow, anything I could do. I'd walk around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if anyone needed help. Most people looked at me like I was some kind of beggar, but a few gave me work, and I was grateful for every dollar I made. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get food. I'd sneak back to my tent with a sandwich or some leftovers, pretending like I was camping out by choice. The worst part was knowing that if my grandfather were still alive, he wouldn't have let this happen. He would have taken me in, no questions asked. But without him, I was alone. I thought about going to a friend's house, but I knew my parents had already spun their version of events to everyone in our small town. I was the troublemaker who couldn't live under their rules. They made it sound like it was my choice to live outside. It was all about making sure their perfect little family image stayed intact. One night, while I was lying in the tent, listening to the wind whip around outside, I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I had to figure something out because they sure weren't coming to help me. That's when it hit me. They never cared. They'd pushed me out without a second thought. I was nothing to them, just some extra baggage they didn't want to deal with. So, I made a decision. I was done trying to win their approval. I was done being the kid they ignored and blamed for everything. If they didn't want me, fine. I was going to figure things out on my own. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stay in that backyard forever, hoping they'd let me back in. I was going to find a way out, and I was going to make it, with or without them. Living in that tent was a constant reminder of how alone I was, and honestly, I was getting desperate. Winter was rough, and the nights felt like they lasted forever. I knew I had to do something. I'd been saving up what little money I could scrape together, doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, but it wasn't enough to make any real difference. I'd go to sleep with my hands aching from the cold and my stomach growling, thinking, this can't be my life forever. One day, after school, I was still trying to go, even though my grades were tanking. I found myself standing outside a local bakery. I used to walk past it all the time, smelling the fresh bread and pastries. That day, I was hungrier than usual. I must have looked like a mess, standing there staring at the display window, because the owner, this old guy named Frank, came out and asked me if I needed something. I didn't really know what to say, so I just kind of shrugged it off, trying to play it cool. But Frank wasn't buying it. He saw right through me. He was one of those no-nonsense types with this gruff voice and a look that said he'd seen his fair share of tough times. He asked, "You looking for work, kid?" I didn't even think twice before nodding. I figured it was my shot. He said he needed someone to sweep the floors, help with deliveries, and clean up the place. Nothing fancy, but he'd pay me cash and throw in some day-old bread. It felt like I'd hit the jackpot. I wasn't going to sleep in that tent with an empty stomach anymore. The first day on the job was rough. The bakery opened early, and when I say early, I mean before the sun even thought about coming up. I was up at 4 a.m., making my way there while the world was still dark. But the moment I walked through those doors, the warmth hit me, and I was like, Yeah, I can do this. Frank showed me around, pointing out what needed to be done and gave me the rundown of his no slacking rule. The work was hard, and my back ached from mopping floors and lifting heavy bags of flour, but I didn't care. I had a place to be, and it felt good to be doing something useful. Frank wasn't the warm and fuzzy type, but over time, we started talking. He'd tell me stories about how he'd opened the bakery years ago, right after his own dad kicked him out for being a screw-up. He'd managed to build it up from nothing, and I think he saw a little bit of himself in me. He started giving me advice, like how to budget my money, and even offered to teach me how to make some of the simpler pastries. It was weird, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone actually gave a damn about what happened to me. After a few weeks of working there, Frank told me he had a small room above the bakery that no one was using. It was basically a storage space, but he said I could crash there if I wanted. It was a step up from the tent, and I was beyond grateful. I moved my stuff in that night. The room was tiny, with a single bed and a window that barely opened, but it was warm, and I finally had a roof over my head. It was the best sleep I'd had in months. Waking up every day and having a place to go felt like a huge deal. I threw myself into the job. I figured if Frank was giving me a chance, the least I could do was work my butt off. I learned how to knead dough, how to make the perfect loaf of bread, and even how to whip up a decent apple pie. Frank was tough, but he was fair, and he'd give me a nod or a grunt when I did something right. It wasn't much, but those little moments meant everything to me. One day after my shift, Frank sat me down. He had this serious look on his face, the kind that made me think I was in trouble. But instead, he handed me an envelope. "You've been doing good work, kid," he said. "Here's your first proper paycheck." I opened it, and it was more money than I'd ever seen in one place before. It wasn't a fortune or anything, but it was enough to make me feel like I was finally on the right track. For the first time, I felt like I was moving forward instead of being stuck in one place. Working at the bakery became my routine. I'd wake up early, work until the afternoon, and then head to the library to use the free Wi-Fi to look for other job opportunities. I knew I couldn't stay at the bakery forever, but it was giving me the stepping stone I needed. I saved every penny I could, living like I was still in that tent, and only spending on absolute essentials. I'd grab the day-old bread Frank offered and make it last a couple of meals, and I'd pick up cans of soup from the dollar store to keep things cheap. Frank and I never really talked about my situation, but I think he knew more than he let on. One night, after closing up, he handed me a set of keys. "In case you ever need to lock up," he said, playing it off like it was no big deal. But I knew what it meant. It was trust. He trusted me to take care of his place, and that felt huge. I didn't have a family looking out for me, but in a weird way, it felt like Frank was looking out for me in his own gruff, silent way. The routine at the bakery kept me going, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when I felt the weight of everything. I'd see families walk into the bakery, parents with their kids, laughing and picking out treats together. It was like a punch to the gut every time. I'd have to step into the back room and catch my breath. Part of me still couldn't believe how my own family had just kicked me out like I was nothing, while complete strangers treated me with more kindness than my own parents ever had. But I wasn't going to let those thoughts drag me down. Frank always told me, you either let life beat you, or you get up and beat it right back. It became kind of like a mantra for me. I wasn't about to give up, not after everything I'd been through. Every day I'd go back to that room above the bakery, and I'd make myself a promise. I was going to keep going, keep pushing, and I was going to build something better for myself. One morning, Frank came in looking more tired than usual. I asked him if everything was okay, and he just grunted and said something about getting old. But he gave me this look that felt almost like a warning, like he was trying to tell me not to get too comfortable. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just figured he was having a rough day. But those words stuck with me. I knew he was right. I couldn't stay at the bakery forever. It was a safe place, yeah, but I needed to start thinking bigger. So I started asking around for more work. I picked up extra shifts at a local convenience store and even helped out with landscaping on weekends. Anything to make a few extra bucks. It wasn't easy balancing everything, but I was determined to save enough to move on to something better. The more I worked, the more I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. It was tough, and some days I was dead tired, but I kept reminding myself why I was doing it. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to build a life where I didn't have to depend on anyone but myself. Looking back, I think about how lucky I was to have found Frank and that bakery. It wasn't just a job. It was the first real step toward getting my life together. And even though things were still uncertain, for the first time, I felt like I had a shot. A real one. I wasn't just the unwanted kid in a tent anymore. I was someone who was making things happen, even if it was one small step at a time, and that was enough to keep me going. After a few years of working my butt off and saving every penny, I finally did it. I bought my own house. It wasn't anything huge or fancy, just a small 3-bedroom place on the edge of town, but it was mine. I can't even describe how it felt walking through those doors for the first time, holding the keys and knowing that this was my space. I stood there in the empty living room, looking around at the bare walls, and felt this rush of pride. I'd done it. I'd made it. And I'd done it without any help from my so-called family. I spent the first few weeks living there without much furniture. Just an air mattress and a couple of cardboard boxes that doubled as a table and a chair. It was rough, but I didn't care. Every morning, I'd wake up and remind myself that this was my place. No one could kick me out. No one could tell me I didn't belong. I started slowly furnishing the place, little things here and there as I could afford them. A couch from a thrift store, a cheap dining table, stuff like that. It was coming together, and with every piece of furniture I brought in, I felt like I was building a real home. Then one day, when I was just starting to feel settled, my doorbell rang. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was a delivery or maybe one of the neighbors stopping by. But when I opened the door, it felt like I'd been punched in the gut. There they were, my parents, Sarah, her husband, and their 3 kids. All of them standing on my porch, smiling like nothing had happened, like they hadn't kicked me out years ago and left me to fend for myself. My mom was the first to speak. "Surprise!" she said, like she was announcing some grand reunion. "We heard you bought a house. We're so proud of you." I just stood there, gripping the doorknob, trying to keep my face neutral. Part of me wanted to slam the door right in their faces, but another part of me was just in shock. I hadn't seen them in years, and now here they were, acting like everything was fine. Sarah pushed her way forward, her baby on her hip, and looked around my entryway like she was appraising it. "Nice place, bro. You've really done well for yourself." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a friendly visit. They were here for something. My family had only ever shown up when they needed something. My dad cleared his throat, looking like he was about to give one of his fatherly speeches. "Son, we were thinking, with Sarah's family growing and all, and you having this big house to yourself, maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. Family should stick together, right?" I almost laughed in his face. Family? These people had thrown me out like trash when I was a teenager, and now they were talking about family? I bit back the anger rising in my throat and forced myself to ask, "What are you really asking for?" My mom stepped forward, all smiles. "Well, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if we all moved in here? One big happy family, like old times." She said it so casually, like she hadn't just asked me to give up the one thing I'd worked so hard for. I could feel the anger building up, the memories of sleeping in a tent, of being ignored and treated like a problem. And now they wanted to move into the home I built on my own? "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's not happening." The smiles dropped. My mom's face twisted in confusion, like she couldn't believe I was saying no. "But we're family," she insisted, like that was supposed to mean something. "We should be helping each other out." I felt my hands start to shake, and I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Where was that attitude when I was 16 and sleeping in a tent in the backyard?" I asked. "Where was family then?" For a moment, they were silent. My dad's face turned red, and he puffed up his chest, like he always did when he was trying to intimidate me. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," I cut him off. "I built this place on my own, without any help from you. I worked every day to get where I am, and I'm not letting you waltz in here like nothing happened. This is my home, and you're not welcome here." Sarah's face twisted into this fake hurt expression. "Come on, don't be selfish. We need the space, and you owe us." That was the final straw. "I owe you?" I snapped. "I don't owe you anything. You all kicked me out when I was a kid, left me with nothing, and now you think you can just show up and take over? Get out." My dad's face turned even redder, and for a second I thought he was going to start yelling. But he just stared at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he finally realized I wasn't that scared kid anymore, the one who used to back down whenever he raised his voice. I wasn't backing down now. My mom tried one last time, her voice softer like she was trying to guilt me. "We know we've made mistakes, but we're trying to make things right. We just want to be a family again." But I wasn't falling for it. "You want to be a family now that I have something you want," I said. "But that's not how it works. I've moved on, and you need to do the same." They stood there for a few more seconds, staring at me like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. But eventually they turned and left, getting into their car without another word. I watched them drive off, feeling this strange mix of anger, relief, and sadness. I'd spent so many years waiting for them to care, for them to show up and finally be the family I needed. But now that they were here, I realized I didn't want them in my life anymore. I didn't need them. I shut the door, leaning against it as I let out a long breath. My hands were still shaking, but there was this sense of freedom washing over me. I'd finally stood up for myself and it felt good. For years, I'd let their treatment define me, make me feel small and unimportant. But now I had my own life, my own home, and I was done letting them take that from me. I knew deep down that this probably wouldn't be the end of it. Toxic people don't just disappear when you tell them no. But for now, I felt like I'd taken the first step. I was learning how to stand on my own 2 feet, how to protect what was mine, and most importantly, how to say no without feeling guilty. I sat down in my now empty living room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. This place was mine. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about building something for myself. I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need their acceptance. I was finally living my own life on my own terms, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me. It had been a couple of weeks since my parents and sister showed up at my door. I thought I'd finally put an end to all that, made it clear they weren't welcome in my life anymore. I was wrong. Toxic people have this way of clawing their way back in, even when you've slammed every door shut. And just when I thought I could finally move on, they found another way to mess with me. It started with a letter. I came home from work one day and found this official-looking envelope in my mailbox. For a second, I panicked. I'd been doing everything right, paying my bills on time, keeping my nose clean, but my gut told me something was off. I ripped it open, and there it was. A legal notice. It said my sister was trying to contest my ownership of the house, claiming it should be shared as family property. My first reaction was disbelief. I stood there in my driveway, staring at the paper like it was written in some foreign language. They really couldn't let me have this one thing, could they? I called a lawyer the next day. I wasn't about to let them take the one thing I worked so hard for. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, yeah, ironic, was clear. They don't have a leg to stand on, but they'll try to make it a hassle for you. She was right. For the next few weeks, they did everything they could to drag me through the mud. They claimed I'd taken money from them and used it to buy the house. They tried to make it sound like I was some ungrateful kid who took advantage of their generosity. It was all lies. I knew it, and they knew it. But that didn't stop them from trying to make me out as the bad guy. I started getting calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old family friends, cousins, people who didn't know anything about what I'd gone through. "Why are you doing this?" they'd ask. "Why can't you just let your family in?" It was frustrating. No one cared to ask what really happened. They just heard my parents' side of the story and assumed I was the villain. I felt like I was back to being that kid they pushed aside, the one who was always wrong no matter what. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I wasn't going to let them mess with my life. So I pushed back. I gathered every receipt, every document showing that I'd saved my own money, worked my own jobs, and built my life without them. And then I decided to take it a step further. I wanted to know exactly how they thought they had any right to my house. So I asked my lawyer to dig into the family's financial records. A few weeks later, she called me into her office. I thought it was just going to be a regular update, but when I walked in, she had this look on her face, like she'd found something big. She handed me a stack of papers. "You need to see this," she said, and I could tell it wasn't going to be good. What I found out changed everything. Turns out, my parents had been hiding a lot from me. Remember my grandfather? The only person in my life who ever really showed me love? Well, when he passed, he'd left me an inheritance. A pretty big one, actually. The money was supposed to go to me when I turned 18, but my parents had managed to get control of it through some loophole. They'd been using that money for years, paying off their own debts, funding my sister's wedding, her husband's failed business, and even part of the down payment for their new house. And they never said a word. I sat there, reading through the documents, feeling my hands shake. I wasn't sure if it was anger, betrayal, or both. They'd let me live in a tent while they spent the money that was supposed to be mine. All those nights I spent wondering why I was never good enough, why they never cared, and it was because I was just a source of cash to them. I was furious. All this time I'd been struggling, working my hands to the bone, and they were living comfortably off what was rightfully mine. I felt stupid for not knowing sooner, for not questioning why they seemed to live beyond their means when I was younger. But mostly, I felt angry at myself for hoping they might actually care, and angry at them for using me. I knew right then that I couldn't let it go. They wanted to take my house, the one thing I had built for myself. Well, I was going to take back everything they stole from me. My lawyer agreed we had a solid case. She said we could sue them for fraud and theft. It wouldn't be easy, but we had the evidence, and she was confident we could win. I was ready to do whatever it took. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about justice, about standing up for myself and proving that I wasn't just the useless son they could toss aside when it suited them. When my parents got served with the papers, I'm pretty sure they didn't see it coming. My phone blew up with calls from my mom, my dad, even my sister, all of them leaving voicemails saying they just wanted to talk. Yeah, right. They wanted to talk now that they were finally facing consequences. I didn't respond. I was done playing their games. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal meetings and court dates. They tried everything to make me look like the bad guy, painting me as some ungrateful child who just wanted to hurt his own family. But the evidence spoke for itself. Every time they tried to pull some sob story, my lawyer would pull out another document showing how they'd siphoned off money that was meant for me. It was brutal, watching them squirm, but it was also the first time I felt like I had power. I wasn't that scared, helpless kid anymore. I was fighting back. When the verdict finally came, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. The judge ruled in my favor. They had to pay me back everything they took, plus damages. The look on their faces when the judgment was read was something I'll never forget. For the first time, they couldn't talk their way out of it. They couldn't twist the narrative. They were caught, and they knew it. Leaving the courthouse that day, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about getting the money back. It was about knowing that I wasn't the worthless son they made me out to be. I'd proven that I could stand up for myself, and for the first time, I felt free from their control. Since then, they've tried to reach out a few more times. They've tried apologizing, saying they want to make amends. But I know better now. Apologies mean nothing when they only come after you've been forced to face the consequences of your actions. I blocked their numbers and made it clear that they're not a part of my life anymore. Now I'm focusing on moving forward. I've got my house, my job, and my own life that I built from scratch. I know there's a long road ahead, but I'm ready for it. And I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from the people who hurt you, even if they're family. Because in the end, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who supports you, and who doesn't treat you like an afterthought. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not letting anyone take away what I've earned. Not anymore. My mother said, "I wish you were never born." So I told her, "Consider me dead." What followed was pure chaos. Sup, Reddit. My own mother told me she wished I was never born, so I made that wish come true. Went full ghost mode on the entire family. What happened next? Complete meltdown. Buckle up because this one's a ride. I'm Jake, 32 male, and I've spent my entire life being the backup kid. You know the type. The one who exists to make the golden child look better by comparison. My younger brother Tyler, 28 male, has been the star of our family since he took his first breath. Kid could set the house on fire, and mom would praise his initiative. Growing up, the favoritism wasn't even subtle. It was so obvious that even family friends would notice and make uncomfortable jokes about it. Tyler got the big bedroom with the bay windows overlooking the backyard, the room with the walk-in closet and attached bathroom. I got the converted storage room in the basement, with a window well that leaked every time it rained and a bathroom I had to share with the laundry room. The carpet in my room smelled like mildew no matter how many times we cleaned it, and in winter you could see your breath because the heating didn't reach down there properly. Tyler got a car for his 16th birthday, a freaking Mustang that Dad spent 3 months restoring in the garage. I remember watching them work on it together on weekends, Dad teaching Tyler about engines and transmissions, both of them covered in grease and laughing about something. I'd ask if I could help and Dad would tell me to go do my homework or mow the lawn. That car became Dad's pride and joy, and Tyler didn't even appreciate it. Crashed it twice in the first year, and both times Dad just fixed it up again without even raising his voice. Me? I got a lecture about responsibility and the bus schedule when I turned 16. Dad sat me down and explained that owning a car was a privilege, not a right, and that I needed to demonstrate financial responsibility first. So, I got a job at the local grocery store, saved up for 8 months, and bought a 1998 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it for $2,800. The thing barely ran, needed constant repairs, but it was mine. Dad never offered to help fix it or teach me anything about car maintenance. I learned from YouTube videos in our driveway while he and Tyler were inside watching football. When Tyler barely scraped through high school with a 2.3 GPA, my parents threw him a graduation party with catering and a DJ. Not just any party, they rented out a banquet hall, invited 150 people, had a slideshow of Tyler's journey through high school that somehow made a C-minus student look like a scholar. The cake alone cost $400. They hired a photographer to capture every moment. Tyler wore a custom suit that Mom had tailored specifically for the occasion. Dad gave this long emotional speech about how proud he was, watching his son overcome obstacles and achieve his dreams. The obstacles being basic high school classes, and the dreams being graduating after 5 years because he failed junior year English. When I graduated 2 years earlier, with a 3.8 GPA, National Honor Society membership, and acceptance to 3 universities with partial scholarships, I got a card with $50 and a good job, while they were busy planning Tyler's college dorm setup. No party, no photographer, no speech. We went to a family dinner at a chain restaurant where Tyler complained about the menu the entire time, and Mom spent the meal asking him what color sheets he wanted for his dorm room. I remember sitting there in my honor cords, watching my parents plan my brother's future, while mine was just an inconvenient interruption to their real priority. The next day, I asked Mom why Tyler got a big party, and I didn't. She said Tyler needed extra encouragement because school was harder for him, and I was self-motivated enough that I didn't need external validation. Self-motivated. That's what you call a kid who figured out early that nobody was going to celebrate his achievements, so he'd better find motivation somewhere else. College was more of the same nightmare, just with higher stakes. Tyler went to State University, partied for 6 years, changed majors 4 times, and finally graduated with a communications degree he's never used. Started as pre-med because Dad wanted a doctor in the family, switched to business after failing organic chemistry, then to psychology because a girl he liked was in that program, then to marketing because it sounded easy, and finally settled on communications because his advisor told him it was the only major he had enough credits to actually complete. My parents paid every cent: tuition, housing, meal plan, spending money, spring break trips, fraternity dues, the works. Probably dropped close to $180,000 on his extended adolescence. I remember Mom justifying it by saying Tyler needed to focus on his studies without the stress of working. Never mind that he spent more time at parties than in class. Me? I went to community college while working full-time at a warehouse, transferred to finish my business degree at a regional campus, and graduated with $31,000 in student loans that I'm still chipping away at. My parents' contribution was exactly $0, and a lot of comments about how I should have applied myself more to get scholarships like Tyler supposedly did. Tyler didn't get scholarships. He got a blank check from Mom and Dad, and still took 6 years to graduate with a degree that requires 4. I worked the overnight shift at the warehouse, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then went straight to classes. I'd sit in the back of lecture halls fighting to stay awake, drinking gas station coffee and eating vending machine food because I didn't have time for real meals. Other students would complain about being tired from staying up late gaming or partying. I was tired from loading trucks for 8 hours before coming to campus. There were weeks I'd work 45 hours, attend 15 hours of classes, and somehow find time to study and do assignments. I'd see Facebook posts of Tyler at football games, parties, road trips with friends. Meanwhile, I was calculating whether I could afford both textbooks and groceries that week. Usually couldn't afford both, so I'd share textbooks with classmates or find older editions at the library. My parents knew all this. They'd see me exhausted at family dinners, falling asleep on their couch because I hadn't slept in my own bed in 3 days. Never once did they offer to help with tuition or reduce my hours by covering some expenses. But Tyler mentioning he wanted to join a fraternity? They had $800 for dues within a week. After college, I got a job in supply chain management. Started at the bottom, worked weird hours, dealt with angry clients and impossible deadlines. Slowly worked my way up over 8 years to senior logistics coordinator. Nothing glamorous, but I make decent money now. Around $73,000 plus bonuses. Own a small house in a decent neighborhood, got a reliable car, pay my bills on time. Basically living a normal adult life. Tyler? He moved back home after graduation, spent 2 years finding himself, worked a series of part-time gigs he'd quit after a few months, and is currently doing freelance graphic design. By freelance, I mean he makes logos for his friends' failed startups and hasn't earned more than $15,000 in any given year. He's 28 and still living in my parents' finished basement rent-free. The real kicker is how my parents talk about us. Tyler is artistic and creative and finding his path. I'm too focused on money and missing the bigger picture. Tyler's lack of employment is following his passion. My stable career is settling for corporate mediocrity. Every family gathering is the same exhausting performance. Mom asks Tyler about his latest project, like he's Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. He'll talk for 30 minutes about some logo design that paid him $200, and she'll nod along asking detailed questions about his creative process and artistic vision. Dad will chime in with observations about Tyler's business acumen and entrepreneurial spirit. They'll discuss his portfolio like it's a museum exhibition. Everyone sits there pretending that designing a logo for your buddy's failed startup is equivalent to running an actual business. Then Mom turns to me and asks if I'm still doing that warehouse thing. Not how's work or what projects are you managing? Just that warehouse thing, said with this tone that suggests I'm doing something vaguely embarrassing that she'd rather not discuss in detail. I manage supply chains for a regional manufacturing company. We handle logistics for 17 states, coordinate with over 40 vendors, and I'm responsible for inventory systems that track millions of dollars in products. I coordinate shipments worth more than my parents' house, solve complex distribution problems, and manage a team of people who actually depend on me to know what I'm doing. But sure, it's that warehouse thing. I tried explaining my job once at Thanksgiving. Got about 3 sentences in before Tyler interrupted with a story about some Instagram influencer who wanted him to design their logo. Everyone's attention immediately shifted to him, and I just sat there with my half-finished explanation hanging in the air like a forgotten thought. Tyler's girlfriend Brooklyn is cut from the same cloth as him. She's a lifestyle influencer with 3,000 Instagram followers, most of whom are definitely bots based on the engagement rates. She posts photos of smoothie bowls and sunset yoga poses while living off Tyler's allowance from our parents. An allowance that I just found out is $800 a month. Tyler's getting basically a free salary for existing, while I worked overnight warehouse shifts to pay for community college. Brooklyn's content is exactly what you'd expect. Generic inspiration quotes overlaid on stock photos, sponsored posts for diet teas that probably don't work, and endless photos of her doing yoga in expensive athleisure wear. She once told me she was building an empire and asked if I wanted to invest in her personal brand expansion. I asked what that meant. She said she needed $5,000 for a professional photo shoot and some Instagram advertising. I declined. My girlfriend Lily is a middle school teacher. She works her butt off for a modest salary, spends her own money on classroom supplies, and genuinely cares about her students. She's smart, kind, funny, and way too good for me. We've been together 4 years, talking about engagement, building a real future together. But according to my family, Brooklyn's Instagram lifestyle is more impressive than Lily's actual career educating children. Mom constantly asks when I'm going to find someone with ambition like Brooklyn. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so infuriating. The breaking point came 3 months ago. Tyler announced he was proposing to Brooklyn, and my parents immediately started planning an engagement party. Not a small gathering, a full production with a guest list of 80 people, catered food, an open bar, the works. Dad called asking me to contribute to the party fund. They were planning to spend around $8,000 on this thing and wanted me to chip in $2,000 since I was doing so well financially. Meanwhile, Tyler wasn't contributing anything because he was saving for the ring with money our parents gave him. I laughed. Actually laughed on the phone. Told Dad I wasn't funding Tyler's engagement party when Tyler wasn't even funding his own engagement ring. Dad went quiet for a second, then said, "Family helps family," and I was being selfish. Selfish. Coming from people who paid $0 toward my education while funding Tyler's 6-year party degree, I told Dad I'd think about it and hung up. Didn't think about it. Not for a second. 2 weeks later, Mom called. She was upset I hadn't sent money for the party. They'd budgeted expecting my contribution, and now they were short. They'd already put deposits down on the venue and caterer based on the assumption I'd come through with the $2,000. I reminded her I never agreed to contribute. Never said yes, never implied yes, never even considered it. She said she assumed I'd do the right thing as Tyler's brother. That family supported family during important moments. That she'd raised me better than to abandon my brother when he needed me. The right thing would have been you treating both your kids equally, I said. But we're way past that conversation. Mom got defensive immediately. They'd always treated us the same, she insisted. Her voice had that edge it gets when she knows she's wrong but refuses to admit it. Any differences were because Tyler needed more support due to his creative nature. I was always more independent and didn't need as much help. I was the responsible one who could handle things on his own. This was the narrative they'd constructed over the years. Tyler needed more because he was sensitive, artistic, finding himself. I needed less because I was independent, capable, self-sufficient. Funny how independent really meant ignored And self-sufficient meant we didn't feel like helping you. I brought up specifics because I was tired of the vague justifications. Tyler's car versus my bus pass. How did a vintage Mustang serve his creative nature? His fully funded 6-year college vacation versus my student loans that I'll be paying until I'm 40. Him living rent-free at 28 while I paid $400 a month starting at 19 years old to live in their basement. She had explanations for everything, of course. The car was necessary for Tyler's social development. He needed to be able to attend events and maintain friendships. I'd wanted the independence of student loans to build credit and learn financial responsibility. Tyler needed time to find his passion, and charging him rent would have added pressure that might have stifled his creativity. Every excuse was garbage, and we both knew it. But she delivered each one with this conviction. Like she'd practiced these justifications so many times, she'd actually started believing them. "You've always been jealous of your brother," she said finally, playing her trump card. That's when I knew we'd crossed into territory we couldn't come back from. I wasn't jealous of Tyler. I pitied him. He was 28, living in our parents' basement, earning poverty wages, completely unprepared for real life. What exactly was I supposed to be jealous of? Mom's voice went cold. At least Tyler knows how to be grateful. At least he appreciates what we do for him. You've always been difficult, always complaining, always making everything about you. Everything is about Tyler, I shot back. It's been about Tyler for 28 years. Maybe if you were more like him, we'd want to help you more. That line hit different. Not because it hurt, because it revealed what she'd been thinking all along. They chose not to help me because I wasn't Tyler, not because I didn't need it, not because I was more independent, but because I wasn't him. "Forget the party money," she said. "Just forget it. We'll figure it out ourselves like we always do. We don't need anything from you." Something snapped. All those years of being second choice, all the double standards, all the excuses, it crystallized into one moment of absolute clarity. "Good," I said, "because from now on, you're getting nothing from me. Don't be dramatic. I'm serious. You don't need anything from me? Great. Consider this relationship over." She laughed. Actually laughed like I'd told a joke. "You're going to stop talking to us because we asked you to help with your brother's engagement party? That's ridiculous. No, I'm going to stop talking to you because you've made it clear for 32 years that I'm the backup kid, the one who exists to make Tyler look good by comparison. I'm done with that role. You're being childish. Maybe. But I'm also done. Fine. If that's how you feel, maybe I wish you were never born. Would have saved us a lot of trouble." There it was. The thing she'd probably thought 1,000 times but finally said out loud. "I wish you were never born." I went quiet. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Mom was breathing hard on the other end, probably realizing she'd crossed a line but too stubborn to take it back. "Okay," I said calmly. "Consider your wish granted. From this moment forward, act like I was never born. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my house. I don't exist to you anymore." "Jake, don't be—" I hung up, blocked her number immediately. Then Dad's number. Then Tyler's number. Then I went through social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and blocked all of them there too. Removed every family member from my contacts who I knew would try to relay messages or play mediator. Cousins who'd side with my parents, aunts and uncles who'd try to smooth things over, family friends who'd been watching this dysfunction for years without saying anything. The blocking process was therapeutic in a way. Each number I blocked felt like cutting another thread that had been holding me down. By the time I finished, I'd removed 17 contacts. 17 people who were connected to that toxic system. Lily came home from work an hour later to find me sitting on the couch staring at nothing. She teaches 7th grade English, and Fridays are always rough because the kids are restless and unfocused. She looked exhausted, her teacher bag heavy with essays she'd need to grade over the weekend. But she took one look at my face and dropped everything. "What happened?" she asked, sitting down next to me without even taking off her coat. I told her everything. The party fund demand, the conversation with Mom getting heated, every excuse she'd made for 32 years of treating me like I didn't matter. The comment about me being jealous. The final insult about wishing I was never born. Lily listened without interrupting, her face getting harder with each detail, her teacher patience wearing thin as she heard how my own mother had spoken to me. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she grabbed my hand and looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said firmly. Not, "Are you sure about this?" Or, "Maybe you should reconsider," or, "Give them time to cool off." Just, "I'm proud of you." No qualifications, no doubts, no suggestions that I was overreacting. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. both in cutting off my family and in choosing Lily. She saw immediately what had taken me 32 years to accept, that the relationship was toxic and one-sided, that I deserved better than being the backup kid, that some bridges need to burn. The first week was quiet. I kept expecting angry calls or texts, but my blocks held. No contact from anyone. Part of me wondered if they'd even noticed or if they were just relieved to have one less obligation. Then Tyler's engagement party happened. I knew the date because it had been mentioned repeatedly before I blocked everyone. That Saturday, I took Lily out for a nice dinner, went to a movie, came home and played video games until midnight. Didn't think about the party once. Sunday morning, my doorbell rang at 8 a.m. I opened it to find my Aunt Rachel standing there, looking uncomfortable. Rachel is my mom's younger sister. She's always been the reasonable one in the family, the person who'd actually listen when I complained about the favoritism. She'd nod sympathetically but never actually do anything about it. "Your mom asked me to talk to you," she said. "Not interested. Jake, please. Just hear me out." Against my better judgment, I let her in. Lily was still asleep, so we sat in the kitchen while I made terrible coffee. Rachel explained the party had been a disaster. Not because I wasn't there, they barely noticed that. It was a disaster because without my $2,000 contribution, they'd had to scale back significantly. Instead of the fancy venue they'd wanted, they used my parents' backyard. Instead of a catering company, Mom and her friends made food. Instead of an open bar, they had a cooler of drinks. Brooklyn was furious, Rachel said. She expected this big fancy party, and it was basically a barbecue. She and Tyler had a huge fight in front of everyone. She accused him of not caring enough to give her a proper engagement celebration. Sounds like a personal problem. Tyler feels terrible. He thinks you sabotaged his party on purpose. I actually laughed. I sabotaged his party by not giving him money I never agreed to give? That's some creative logic. Rachel looked uncomfortable. Your mom is really hurt. She didn't mean what she said on the phone. Yes, she did. She meant every word. She wished I was never born, so I'm making that wish come true. She was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. Rachel, I've had 32 years to observe how my parents treat me versus how they treat Tyler. That comment wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the truth finally coming out. She tried the family angle. Blood is thicker than water. We only get one set of parents. Life is too short for grudges. I shut down every cliche with simple facts. They'd chosen Tyler over me for 3 decades. I was just accepting their choice. What do you want me to tell your mom? Rachel asked finally. Tell her exactly what I told her. I don't exist to her anymore. She needs to act like I was never born. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. Rachel left looking defeated. I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, no sadness. Just relief that my boundaries were holding. 2 weeks later, Dad showed up at my work. My work. He somehow got past the front desk and showed up at my office door during lunch. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. I kept eating my sandwich. You're being stubborn. I'm being consistent. I told Mom I was done. That includes you. He sat down anyway, uninvited. Started talking about how I was tearing the family apart, how Tyler was upset, how Mom cried every day, how this whole situation was ridiculous over a few $1,000s. It's not about the money, I interrupted. It's about 32 years of being treated like I don't matter. That's not true. Dad, you restored a Mustang for Tyler's 16th birthday. You gave me a bus schedule. You said you didn't want a car. I was 14 when I said that because I knew we couldn't afford 2 cars. Then Tyler turned 16, and suddenly money wasn't an issue. He had no response to that. Just sat there looking uncomfortable. You paid for Tyler's college completely. I graduated with $31,000 in debt that I'm still paying off. We were in a better financial position when Tyler went to school. You bought him a car 3 years before he went to school. You could have saved that money for my education instead. Again, nothing. Tyler lives in your basement rent-free at 28. I paid rent at 19. Tyler needs more time to establish himself. And I didn't? We went in circles for 20 minutes. Every double standard I brought up, he had an excuse for. Every example of favoritism, he explained away. He genuinely couldn't see it. Or he could see it, but couldn't admit it. Finally, I told him to leave or I'd call security. He stood up, angry now. You're going to regret this, he said. Family is all you've got in this world. Then I guess I don't have much. He left. I finished my sandwich and went back to work. That evening, my boss called me into his office. Your father was here today, he said carefully. I know, I'm sorry about that. He told me some concerning things. Said you were having a mental health crisis and might not be reliable at work. Wanted me to keep an eye on you? My blood ran cold. I'm not having any crisis. We had an argument. and I cut contact. He's trying to cause problems. My boss nodded. That's what I figured. The fact that he'd come to your workplace and make those claims told me more about him than about you. But I wanted you to know in case he tries other things. Other things. Like he might escalate beyond just showing up. I thanked my boss and left. Called Lily on the way home and told her what happened. She was furious. Her suggestion was getting a restraining order, but that felt extreme. Instead, I sent a group email to my boss, HR, and building security explaining the family situation and requesting they not allow my parents or brother into the building. The next week, Tyler showed up at my house. It was a Tuesday evening. Lily and I were cooking dinner when the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw him standing there in his standard outfit of artistically distressed jeans and a vintage band t-shirt. I didn't open the door, just called through it. Go away. Dude, come on, we need to talk. Nothing to talk about. You're ruining my engagement. Brooklyn's family thinks we're broke because of the party situation. Her dad keeps asking why my brother didn't help out. It's embarrassing. Sounds like a you problem. Stop being petty. I know you're mad about the college thing and the car thing, but that was years ago. Get over it. The college thing and the car thing. Like they were isolated incidents instead of symptoms of a lifetime pattern. Tyler, I'm going to say this once. Leave. Don't come back. If you show up again, I'm calling the police. Over what? I'm your brother. Trespassing. Now leave. He stood there another minute, probably expecting me to crack. I didn't. Eventually, he left, but not before shouting that I was being a jerk and Brooklyn's family thought our whole family was dysfunctional. Good. Let them think that. Not my problem anymore. Week 5 brought the really creative escalation. Mom started calling Lily. She'd gotten Lily's number somehow, probably from an old family event where we'd shared contact info. The messages started sympathetic. She was worried about me, wanted to make sure I was okay, hoped Lily could talk some sense into me. Lily didn't respond to any of them. Then Mom shifted tactics, started suggesting maybe Lily was the problem. Maybe she was turning me against my family. Maybe she didn't understand family dynamics. Maybe she was isolating me. Classic manipulation, attempting to drive a wedge between us. Lily showed me every message. We blocked Mom's number on her phone too. That Saturday, Mom showed up at the elementary school, where Lily teaches. Waited until after classes and approached her in the parking lot. Lily called me immediately. Your mom is here. She's crying and saying she just wants to talk to you. Don't engage. Get in your car and leave. She's blocking my car. I told Lily to call the school security officer. Mom was removed from school property and warned about trespassing. Lily filed a formal report with the principal explaining the situation. They flagged Mom's name in their security system. This was getting out of hand. They'd gone from asking me to reconsider to actively harassing me and the people around me. I talked to a lawyer friend who suggested documenting everything and considering a restraining order if it continued. Month 2 brought an unexpected twist. My Uncle Dave reached out. Dave is Dad's brother, and we'd always gotten along okay. He wasn't asking me to reconcile. He wanted to tell me something. We met at a diner across town. Dave looked uncomfortable, kept stirring his coffee without drinking it. I'm not here to take sides, he started. But you should know what's being said about you. Apparently, my parents had been telling people I'd had a breakdown, that I'd become unstable and cut off the family without reason, that I'd always been troubled, and they'd tried to help, but I refused. They were painting themselves as victims of my mental illness. Mom's telling people you threatened her, Dave said, that you called her horrible names and said violent things. She's saying she's afraid of you. This was beyond simple manipulation. This was character assassination. They were creating a narrative where I was dangerous, unstable, the villain, where they were innocent victims of my irrational behavior. None of that happened, I said. I know. I've known you your whole life. You're probably the most stable person in that family. But they're committed to this story. Why are you telling me this? Dave shrugged. Because it's wrong. And because I watched them do the same thing to you for years. The favoritism, the double standards. I saw it. Most of us saw it. We just didn't say anything. Why not? Because it wasn't our place. Because your parents are adults who make their own choices. Because getting involved in other people's family dynamics is complicated. He paused. But this is different. They're lying about you, damaging your reputation. That's too far. I thanked Dave for the heads up. Asked if he'd be willing to make a statement if it came to legal action. He said yes without hesitation. Armed with Dave's information, I sent a clear message through my lawyer to my parents. Stop spreading false information about me. Stop contacting my workplace. Stop contacting Lily. Stay away from our properties. Any further contact would result in legal action, including restraining orders and a defamation suit. The lawyer's letter worked. Sort of. Direct contact stopped, but the rumor mill didn't. Extended family members kept trying to reach out as mediators. Some bought my parents' story about me being unstable. Others just wanted everyone to get along. I maintained my position. No contact meant no contact. I wasn't interested in mediation, family therapy, or reconciliation. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was nuked from orbit and the ashes scattered. Month 3 brought Tyler's wedding planning. Apparently, Brooklyn had gotten over her disappointment about the engagement party, and they'd set a date for 6 months out. According to my Aunt Rachel, who still occasionally updated me despite my preferences, it was going to be a big, expensive affair. Dad had asked Tyler if he wanted me as a best man. Tyler said no. He'd rather have his friend Brandon, someone who actually supported his relationship. Good. Saved me from having to decline. But here's where it got interesting. Brooklyn's parents were old-school traditional. They expected the groom's family to host certain events and contribute to specific wedding costs. When they found out Tyler's brother wasn't involved, they started asking questions. According to Rachel, Brooklyn's father point-blank asked my parents what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I participating in my brother's wedding? Was I in prison? On drugs? Estranged over something serious? Mom apparently tried her mental illness story, but Brooklyn's father wasn't buying it. He'd done some basic internet searching, found my LinkedIn, saw my normal professional life, asked around through his network. I wasn't unstable. I was a functioning adult with a good job and clean record. So he pushed harder. What had actually caused the rift? The truth came out eventually. Not from my parents, but from various family members Brooklyn's father spoke to. The favoritism, the college funding disparity, the party fund drama, Mom's comment about wishing I was never born. Brooklyn's father was reportedly furious. Not at me, at my parents. He came from a large family where everyone was treated equally. The idea of parents openly favoring one child over another was unacceptable to him. He apparently told Tyler that maybe he should consider whether Brooklyn really wanted to marry into a family with such dysfunction. Tyler panicked, called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. "Dude, you're destroying my life," he said immediately. "Tyler, Brooklyn's dad thinks our family is screwed up because of you. He's questioning whether she should marry me. Her mom is asking all these questions about how we were raised. This is a nightmare. Sounds like a personal problem. You need to fix this. Come to dinner, talk to Brooklyn's parents, show them you're not some crazy person. I'm not the one who told them I was crazy. That was Mom. Whatever, just fix it." "No. What do you want, an apology? Fine. I'm sorry you're upset about the college stuff. There, now fix this. I don't want anything from you. I want you to leave me alone. You're really going to let me lose Brooklyn over this? You're not losing Brooklyn over me. You might lose her because she's realizing what kind of family you come from. That's not my fault." He started getting angry, calling me selfish and petty. I hung up and blocked that number too. But the damage was done. Brooklyn started having serious doubts about marrying Tyler. Not because of me specifically, but because of what my absence revealed about my parents' character. If they could treat one son so differently from another, what did that say about their values? Her father was even more direct. He told Tyler he wouldn't give his blessing for the marriage unless some serious family issues got resolved. He wanted to see my parents acknowledge what they'd done and make genuine efforts to repair the relationship with me. My parents, predictably, refused. They hadn't done anything wrong. Any problems were because of my attitude and unrealistic expectations. They'd treated both sons fairly, and I was just ungrateful. Brooklyn's father told Tyler the wedding was off until the family situation improved. Brooklyn agreed with her father. She wanted a marriage based on healthy family dynamics, not whatever toxic situation my parents had created. Tyler's wedding got postponed indefinitely. He blamed me completely. Started posting vague things on social media about family betrayal and fake people. I'd blocked him, but Lily showed me screenshots from mutual acquaintances. Month 4 was quiet. No contact attempts, no escalation, just silence. I wondered if they'd finally accepted the situation, or if they were regrouping for another approach. Turned out it was neither. They were dealing with consequences. Uncle Dave called with an update. Tyler had moved out of my parents' basement. The postponed wedding and Brooklyn's ultimatums had forced him to get his life together. He'd gotten a real job doing IT support at a mid-sized company. Not glamorous, but steady income. He and Brooklyn had moved into a small apartment together. More interesting, Brooklyn had insisted on premarital counseling focusing on family dynamics and boundaries. She'd made it clear she wouldn't marry into a family that practiced the kind of favoritism mine had demonstrated. Tyler was apparently in counseling trying to understand his own complicity in the dysfunction. Your brother's growing up. Dave said. Painfully. But he's growing up. Good for Tyler, I guess. Didn't change anything for me. Even more interesting, my parents were facing social consequences. Other family members had started distancing themselves after hearing the full story. Cousins who'd always been close to Mom were suddenly busy when she called. Dad's weekly poker night dissolved when 3 of the 5 regular players decided they didn't want to associate with someone who'd treated his kid that way. The church community they'd been active in for 20 years was asking questions. Someone had mentioned the situation to the pastor during a counseling session. He'd apparently given my parents a gentle suggestion that they reflect on their parenting choices and consider making amends. They'd stopped attending church rather than face those conversations. They're becoming social pariahs, Dave said. Not completely, but people are treating them differently now. They're facing consequences for the first time. Month 5 brought the letter. Not a text or email, an actual handwritten letter delivered by certified mail. From Dad. It was 3 pages long. Started with a lengthy explanation of their parenting philosophy, how they'd tried to meet each child's unique needs, how they'd always loved both of us equally, even if they expressed it differently. Then it shifted to justifications. The car situation was about Tyler needing social opportunities I didn't care about. The college funding was about their financial situation changing. Tyler living rent-free was temporary help during a difficult time. Page 3 finally got to something resembling an apology. They were sorry I felt hurt. Sorry I'd misunderstood their intentions. Sorry our relationship had deteriorated over a misunderstanding about the engagement party. The letter ended with an invitation to family counseling with a mediator of my choosing. They wanted to repair the relationship and help me understand their perspective better. I read it twice. Showed it to Lily. She summarized it perfectly. That's not an apology. That's a justification with an apology filter. She was right. The entire letter was about them, their intentions, their perspective, their pain. The only thing they were sorry about was that I'd misunderstood them. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry I'd reacted to it. I didn't respond to the letter. Just filed it away in case I needed documentation later. 2 weeks later, Tyler reached out through LinkedIn of all places. Professional network messaging seemed like a weird choice, but maybe he figured I couldn't block him there without looking petty to professional contacts. His message was different from the phone call. More measured, less demanding. I've been in counseling like Brooklyn wanted, talking about family stuff, realizing some things I didn't see before. You were right about the favoritism. I didn't see it because I was the one benefiting from it. That was wrong. I'm sorry. I wrote back one sentence. Good luck with that. Not mean, not encouraging. Just acknowledgement. He'd apologized, I'd acknowledged it. That's all our relationship could be. Last week, Aunt Rachel texted one final time. Mom had asked her to reach out about the engagement. Apparently they'd heard through mutual Facebook connections. She wants to come to the wedding. She's very hurt she wasn't told. I replied. She told me she wished I was never born. I'm making that wish come true. She doesn't get to participate in the life she wished didn't exist. Rachel didn't respond after that. So here I am, Reddit, planning a wedding without the people who raised me. Building a life with someone who actually sees me as more than a backup option. Creating a family based on choice rather than obligation. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. All right, everybody. Today's story is about a guy who spent 14 years building up a company's sales and training division from nothing. He was the top performer, the closer, the guy who turned walk-ins into repeat customers and new hires into competent employees. Then the company got bought out by a new owner who looked at the books and thought, I can do this cheaper. She tried to slash his pay to minimum wage on a 0-hours contract. When he refused, she fabricated gross misconduct charges. What she didn't count on was the fact that this man recorded every word of the disciplinary meeting, had an employment lawyer on speed dial, and knew more about labor law than she knew about the business she just bought. His replacement quit on day 1. The company barely survived. And the settlement check? Let's just say it had a lot of zeros. Buckle up. The new owner tried to cut my pay to minimum wage after I'd built the business for 14 years. I recorded the meeting, hired a lawyer, and watched the company collapse without me. I want to share what happened to me because I think a lot of people in similar situations don't know their rights. And knowing your rights, as it turns out, is worth more than any pay raise. My name's Garrett. I'm 41. For 14 years, I worked as the senior training and sales coordinator for a mid-sized service company in the Midwest. I'll keep the details vague enough that nobody can identify the business, but think home improvement, residential services, the kind of company where customers call, someone shows up, does the work, and bills them. We had maybe 35 employees at our peak. I was one of the first 10. When I joined at 27, the company was small and rough around the edges. The owner, a guy named Walt, had started it out of his garage and grown it into a legitimate operation through sheer stubbornness and a good reputation. Walt was old school, handshake deals, no computers until I showed up and insisted. He hired me originally as a sales associate, but within a year I was doing everything, training new hires, handling customer complaints, building the scheduling system, setting up our first real CRM, and closing the bigger accounts that Walt didn't have the patience for. Let me explain what I mean by built the business. When I started, the company did about $280,000 a year in revenue. By the time everything went down 14 years later, we were doing $1.6 million. Same service area, same general customer base, just better systems, better people, and better sales processes. I don't take all the credit. Walt was the foundation. But I was the framework. I built the training program that turned random hires into reliable service providers. I built the referral system that kept customers coming back. I built the upsell protocols that doubled our average ticket. And I did all of it while also being the company's top individual salesman for 11 of those 14 years. Walt appreciated me. In his way. He wasn't a hugger or a speech giver. He'd just nod and say, "Good work," and occasionally hand me a bonus check around the holidays. The bonuses weren't huge, $1,200, $1,500, but they were consistent, and I knew they came from a real place. Walt wasn't generous with everyone. He was generous with people who earned it. I should mention my wife, Danielle. She's been my rock through all of this. She works as an administrative coordinator at a dental practice. Between the two of us, we did fine. Not rich, not struggling. Mortgage on a 3-bedroom house, 1-car payment, a dog named Ringo, after the Beatle, not because he fetches rings, although he does fetch socks, which is close enough. We were comfortable. The kind of comfortable where you don't check your bank account before buying groceries, but you do check it before buying furniture. Anyway, about 2 years ago, Walt decided to sell. His health wasn't great, bad back, knee problems, the kind of accumulated wear from 30 years of physical work. He didn't have kids who wanted the business. He'd talked about it casually for years, and finally a buyer came along. The sale process took about 4 months. During that time, Walt pulled me aside one afternoon in the parking lot. It was one of those random moments where he'd linger by his truck like he had something to say, but didn't know how to start. He finally said, "Garrett, whoever buys this place, you're the reason it's worth buying. I hope they understand that." I said, "I hope so too." He said, "I told them about you. Told them you're the most important person in the building." I appreciated that. I still do. But telling someone about value and making them contractually obligated to respect it are two very different things. Walt did one. He should have done both. The buyer was a woman I'll call Margot. Margot came from a completely different industry. She'd been in retail management, running a chain of home goods stores that had been bought out by a larger company. She got a payout from that deal and decided to invest in a local service business. Her words. She saw our revenue numbers and our customer retention rate and thought she was buying a turnkey operation. What she didn't understand, what she never bothered to learn, was that those numbers were me, not the brand, not the location, not the equipment. Me, my systems, my relationships, my training programs, my sales approach. Take me out, and the whole thing was just a guy with a truck and a phone number. Walt introduced me to Margot during the transition period. I shook her hand, showed her around, explained the operation. She nodded along and took notes on an iPad. She asked how many units we moved per quarter. I said, "We don't really think of it that way. We have about 400 active customer accounts, and our average annual revenue per account is about $4,000. She looked at me like I'd spoken a different language. She said, "So we're not tracking unit velocity?" I said, "We're tracking happy customers who keep calling us back." She made a note on her iPad and didn't ask me another question that day. Hold on. For the listeners, this is me jumping in. I want to make sure you're catching the red flags here, because Garrett might be too close to see them. Unit velocity. This woman asked about unit velocity at a home services company. That's like asking a plumber about his Fluid optimization metrics. Margot came from retail, where everything is widgets and throughput. She's about to run a relationship-based service business using a home goods playbook. I'm calling her Discount Margot because she's about to discount the only valuable thing in this company, the guy standing in front of her, and mark up everything else. This is going to be beautiful and painful. Probably more painful for Margot. The first 6 months under Margot's ownership were a slow descent. She didn't make big changes immediately. I think she was observing, or maybe she was just figuring out what she'd bought. But there were signs. She raised prices by 15% across the board without asking anyone who dealt with customers whether that was a good idea. It wasn't. We lost about 30 accounts in the first quarter. Customers who'd been with us for years called me personally to say they were going elsewhere. I couldn't blame them. I would have done the same thing. She cut the holiday bonuses. Not reduced, cut. 0. For everyone. She said the company needed to redirect resources toward growth initiatives. I asked what the growth initiatives were. She said she was still developing the strategy. No bonuses and no strategy. Just a vague promise and a tighter budget. She stopped approving the materials I'd been using for training. I had a whole onboarding system, binders, checklists, video walkthroughs I'd recorded on my phone, that I gave every new hire. Margot said the training materials looked unprofessional and that she was going to hire someone to create branded onboarding content. That someone never materialized. So new hires got nothing, and the quality of work started slipping. She also restructured the scheduling system I'd spent years building. I had a rotation that balanced workload, travel time, and customer preference. Some customers specifically requested certain technicians. Margot replaced it with a first available model that dispatched whoever was closest geographically, regardless of skill level or customer relationship. Within a month, we had 2 situations where a junior tech was sent to a complex job they weren't qualified for. Both resulted in callbacks. One resulted in a refund. The customer, Mrs. Patterson, who'd been with us 9 years, called me personally and said, "Garrett, what happened? That was not the service I'm used to." I apologized and said we were going through changes. She said, "Changes aren't supposed to make things worse." I started keeping a personal log around this time. Not for legal purposes, not yet. Just for my own sanity. A Google Doc where I'd write down what happened each day. Prices raised, bonuses cut, training canceled, scheduling broken, quality slipping. I called it The Descent. Danielle read some of it one night and said, "Garrett, this reads like a horror story." I said, "It is one. I'm just living in it." Through all of this, I kept doing my job. I kept closing sales. I kept training the guys who needed it, using my own materials on my own time. I kept the referral system running. I kept customer relationships alive. And every month, the numbers stayed relatively stable. Not because of anything Margot did, but in spite of everything she did. I want to mention one thing that happened during this period that still makes me shake my head. Margot held a team-building event about 3 months after she took over. She rented a conference room at a hotel, spent about $2,000 on it, and made the entire staff sit through a 4-hour presentation about company vision and values. She had slides. She had a mission statement she'd written. She had a quote from some business guru on every other page. At one point she said, "Our competitive advantage isn't what we do. It's how we do it." And I thought, no. Our competitive advantage is relationships. It's the fact that when Mrs. Patterson calls, she gets me. When Mr. Volkov has an emergency, I pick up the phone. When a new hire doesn't know how to handle a tricky situation, I walk them through it. That's not a mission statement. That's just showing up. But you can't put "just show up" on a PowerPoint slide, I guess. During the lunch break at the team building event, one of the senior techs, a guy named Phil, who'd been with us almost as long as me, pulled me aside in the hallway and said, "Garrett, is she for real?" I said, "I think so, Phil." He said, "We're in trouble, aren't we?" I said, "Yeah, I think we might be." Phil quit about a month after I did. He opened his own one-man operation out of his garage. He's doing fine. I send him referrals when I can. Then she came for my paycheck. It was a Tuesday morning. She called me into the back office, the same office where Walt used to hand me bonus checks, and told me she'd been reviewing the compensation structure. and determined that my salary was not aligned with industry benchmarks. She said the company was transitioning to performance-based flexible contracts and that my new arrangement would be minimum wage base with commission on completed projects on a 0 hours contract. No guaranteed hours, no guaranteed income, no benefits. I'd been making $52,000 a year with benefits. She was offering me minimum wage, $8.70 an hour at the time, with the theoretical possibility of commission. For a guy who'd been there 14 years and was responsible for 60% of the company's revenue. I said no. Obviously. She said, Garrett, this is the direction the company is going. If you're not on board, we may need to explore other options. I said, what other options? She said, I think you know. I want to pause here and describe what was happening in my body during this conversation. My hands were flat on my thighs under the desk. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. There was this roaring in my ears. Not anger exactly, more like a pressure buildup. 14 years. I'd given 14 years of my life to this company. I'd missed Danielle's birthday dinner once because a customer had an emergency. I'd come in on a Saturday to train a new hire who needed extra help. I'd spent my own money on gas driving to jobs when the company truck was in the shop because I didn't want to cancel on a customer. And now this woman, who'd owned the business for 6 months and couldn't tell me what half our services cost without checking her iPad, was sitting across from me offering minimum wage. Like I was some kid applying at a fast food place. Like 14 years was worth $8.70 an hour. I didn't say any of that. I said, I'll need some time to think about it. She said, don't take too long. I left the office, went to my truck, and sat there for about 20 minutes with the engine running and my forehead on the steering wheel. Then I drove home and called Danielle. She listened to everything and said, Garrett, do not take that deal. We will figure this out. That's when I knew it was going to be okay. Whatever happened, it was going to be okay. Pause. I need everyone to sit with this for a second. Discount Margot just tried to cut a 14-year veteran's salary from $52,000 to minimum wage on a 0 hours contract. That's not a pay cut. That's economic eviction. She wants to turn the guy who built the business into an Uber driver for his own company. Performance-based flexible contract. That's corporate for, I want you to work for free unless you personally generate enough profit to justify feeding yourself. And the veiled threat? We may need to explore other options? Lady, the only option you should be exploring is a mirror, because the person you're about to lose is the only reason your investment isn't worthless. This has big fire festival energy, all ambition, no infrastructure, and someone's about to get stranded on a beach with no food. 2 weeks later, I was called into a formal disciplinary meeting. Margot, her part-time HR consultant, a woman from an agency who clearly didn't want to be there, and me. The charge, gross misconduct. Specifically, Margot claimed that I had been using unauthorized methods to deliver services and that several customer complaints had been filed about work quality. Now, I want to be very clear about something. There were no customer complaints about my work. I asked to see the complaints. Margot said they were verbal and not documented. I asked which customers complained. She said she wasn't at liberty to disclose. I asked the HR consultant if this was standard procedure. The HR consultant looked at her notes and said, typically, documented evidence is required for a gross misconduct charge. Margot moved on. She said that regardless, my attitude and resistance to structural changes were creating a hostile work environment. I had literally never raised my voice to anyone in that building. I'd never sent a hostile email. I'd never refused a task. My resistance was saying no to a 90% pay cut. That was the hostile part, apparently. Here's where it gets interesting. Before the meeting, I did something that might have saved my financial future. I checked the recording laws in my state. We're a one-party consent state, which means I only need my own permission to record a conversation I'm part of. So I turned on the voice memo app on my phone before walking into that meeting, and I recorded every single word. Margot spent about 20 minutes building her case, if you can call it that. The unauthorized methods turned out to be me using my own training materials instead of the branded ones she never created. The customer complaints had no names, no dates, no documentation. The hostile work environment was me disagreeing with her compensation proposal. It was embarrassing, honestly. Not for me, for her. Even the HR consultant was shifting in her chair. At the end, Margot gave me two options. Accept the new compensation structure, minimum wage, 0 hours, commission only, or accept termination for gross misconduct with no severance. I said, I'd like to think about it overnight. She said, take the weekend. I took the weekend. And I spent every hour of it on the phone with an employment attorney named Pete, who my neighbor had recommended. Pete listened to the recording, reviewed my employment history, and said, and I'm quoting here, Garrett, this woman just handed you a case on a silver platter. Wait. He recorded it. This man walked into a rigged disciplinary meeting with his phone recording in his pocket like he was wearing a wire in a mob movie. Discount Margot thought she was setting up a termination. She was actually recording her own blooper reel. No documented complaints, no evidence, no nothing. Just a woman with an iPad and a grudge trying to push out the best employee she'll ever have because he wouldn't accept a pay structure designed for a summer intern. Pete the lawyer just heard this recording and said, silver platter. I'm telling you, when lawyers get excited, that's when you know the other side messed up bad. This is about to cost Margot more than she budgeted. Way more. That weekend was one of the most productive weekends of my life. Pete and I talked for a total of about 4 hours across Saturday and Sunday. He listened to the full recording twice. He pulled up my employment contract, which, thank God, I'd kept a copy of in my files at home. He reviewed the company's employee handbook, which Margot hadn't changed from Walt's original version. And here's the kicker. The handbook explicitly stated that disciplinary action for gross misconduct required documented evidence of the misconduct, including dates, descriptions, and corroborating statements. Margot had none of that. Zero. She'd fired a gun with no bullets, and Pete was about to show her the empty chamber. Pete also pointed out something I hadn't considered. The recording captured Margot admitting that the unauthorized methods I was charged with were, in her own words, materials you created yourself. She literally acknowledged that I created the training system and then tried to fire me for using it. Pete said, that's not misconduct. That's initiative. And she just admitted on tape that she knows it. Danielle and I sat at the kitchen table Sunday night and she said, so what's the plan? I said, I go in Monday and I don't accept anything. Pete handles the rest. She nodded and said, good. And Garrett? No matter what happens, we're fine. We've always been fine. That's Danielle, steady as a rock when I need her to be. I came back Monday and told Margot I would not accept either option. I presented her with a letter from Pete outlining my rights under employment law, specifically that terminating a 14-year employee for fabricated gross misconduct without documentation constituted constructive dismissal and potential wrongful termination. The letter also mentioned the recording. Margot went pale. And I mean pale, like someone had turned her brightness setting down to about 30%. She asked when I'd recorded the meeting. I said, during the meeting. One-party consent state. She said, you can't do that. I said, Pete says I can. Call him if you'd like. She did not call Pete. She looked at her HR consultant. The HR consultant was studying her notes with the intensity of someone trying to teleport out of the room. Nobody spoke for about 8 seconds. 8 seconds doesn't sound long. In a conference room with a termination letter on the table and a recording on the other side of it, 8 seconds feels like 8 hours. Margot finally said, I'll need to consult with my legal team. I said, of course, Pete's number is on the letter. I stood up, shook both their hands because I'm not an animal, and walked out. What followed was about 3 weeks of negotiations conducted entirely through lawyers. Margot's attorney, who I suspect told her she was in a bad position, pushed for a quiet settlement. Pete pushed for full remedy. In the end, we settled on a separation package that included 12 weeks of paid notice, at my current salary, not minimum wage, full payout of accrued benefits and unused vacation, a neutral reference letter, and a confidential settlement figure that I can't disclose, but I will say this. It had 5 digits, and the first one wasn't a 1. Or a 2. I worked through my notice period professionally. Did my job. Trained nobody because there was nobody to train. Margot hadn't hired a replacement. She seemed to think the other employees would absorb my responsibilities. The other employees were service technicians. They fix things. They don't sell things or train people or manage 400 customer accounts. During my notice period, something unexpected happened. Several of our longtime customers found out I was leaving. Not from me, from the technicians who mentioned it on jobs. They started calling, not to complain about the company, to thank me. Mr. Volkov, who owned a row of rental properties we'd serviced for 8 years, called and said, "Garrett, you always picked up the phone. That mattered." Mrs. DeLuca, who I'd helped through an emergency repair on Christmas Eve 6 years ago, her furnace died at 11 p.m. I drove out personally with a space heater while we arranged a fix for the next morning. Sent me a card. It said, "Some people just show up. You always showed up." I'm not gonna lie, I teared up at that one. Danielle found me reading it at the kitchen counter and didn't say anything. She just stood next to me for a minute and then went back to whatever she was doing. That's love. Not big gestures. Just standing next to someone when they're feeling something. One customer, a guy named Hank, who ran a small restaurant and had been with us since year 2, did something I still can't believe. He called me and asked if I needed a job reference. I said I appreciated it, but I was a vendor, not an employee of his. He said, "I don't care. You want me to write a letter saying Garrett is the most reliable person I've ever worked with in any capacity? Because I will. I'll write it right now." He sent me the letter the next day. 2 pages. I keep it in my desk drawer. On my last day, a young guy named Drew, one of the techs I'd trained personally about 3 years earlier, shook my hand in the parking lot and said, "Garrett, this place is going to fall apart without you." I said, "I know, Drew. Take care of yourself." He said, "I already put in my notice. I'm coming to find you wherever you end up." And he did. 2 months later, Drew called me and asked if I knew of any openings. I got him a job at a competitor who I'd known for years. He's doing great. Sent me a photo last week of a job he completed. Big smile, clean work, happy customer in the background. I showed Danielle and she said, "You taught him that." And yeah, I did. That's the thing about training people, right? It lasts longer than any company. Longer than any boss. Longer than any 5-minute email policy. Yo, Drew quit in solidarity. That's not just loyalty, that's a review. When your employees follow you out the door, that's a 5-star Glassdoor review written in real time. And Discount Margot is sitting in an empty office wondering where her unit velocity went. I'll tell you where it went. It drove home in Garrett's truck along with 14 years of sales relationships, training knowledge, and customer trust. You can't buy that at a home goods clearance sale. Margot paid for a business and got a building. The business walked out the door, got in a pickup, and drove to a lawyer's office. That's not a transaction gone wrong. That's a transaction that was never going to work because you can't own what you don't understand. What happened after I left was predictable but still kind of wild to watch from the outside. Within the first month, revenue dropped by about 40%. My customer accounts started calling and getting Margot, who they didn't know and didn't trust. Several of them called me directly. They had my cell from years of working together and asked where I'd gone. I told them I'd left the company and wished them well. I didn't poach. I didn't need to. About 20 of them left on their own within 3 months. Margot's replacement for me was herself. She tried to handle sales and training while also running the business. She sent mass emails to our customer list, something I'd specifically never done because it felt impersonal, and our customers valued the personal touch. The mass emails had typos. Multiple customers told me about them. One guy, a regular named Bill, who'd been with us for 11 years, forwarded me the email and said, "Is this a joke?" It was not a joke. It was just bad. The training gap was even worse. New hires who came in after me had no onboarding system, no training materials, no mentor. One of them showed up to a customer's house and didn't know how to use the equipment. The customer called Margot. Margot apparently blamed the employee. The employee quit the next day. I heard Margot went through 4 new hires in 3 months. None lasted more than 6 weeks. About 5 months after I left, I heard through Drew that Margot was trying to sell the company. She'd listed it with a business broker at about 70% of what she'd paid for it. The broker told her the valuation was low because the key revenue-generating personnel had departed and the customer base had significantly eroded. I imagine that was a fun conversation. I also heard, through Hank, the restaurant owner who wrote me the reference letter, that Margot tried to reactivate some of the customer accounts that had gone dormant after I left. She sent personal letters to about 50 former customers, offering a loyalty discount to come back. 3 people responded, 3 out of 50. And 2 of those 3 called me afterward asking if the company was desperate. I said I couldn't comment. But yes, they were desperate. The business broker apparently told Margot that the company's value had declined by about 60% since she'd purchased it, 60% in less than a year. The revenue that Walt and I had built over 14 years was evaporating in real time because the one person who knew how to generate it was gone. And Margot's response? She listed the company for sale and started looking at other investment opportunities. I heard she's interested in a laundromat chain now. I genuinely wish those laundromats well. Last I checked, the listing was still active. Nobody's buying. Turns out a service company without its service people and its customer relationships is just a phone number and some used equipment. Who could have predicted that? Oh, one more thing. Remember Walt, the original owner? He called me about a month after I left. He'd heard what happened. He said, "Garrett, I should have put something in the sale agreement about keeping you on. That was my mistake." I told him it wasn't his fault. He said, "Maybe not, but I knew what you were worth. And I should have made sure the next person knew too." Then he said, "If you ever want to start your own thing, I'll back you." I haven't taken him up on it yet, but I think about it. I ran into one of Margot's failed new hires at a gas station about 2 months after I left. Young kid, maybe 23. He recognized me from the one day of training he'd gotten before I left, which was basically me showing him around for an hour. He said, "Hey, you're the guy who used to run things, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Dude, I lasted 11 days. She had me going to jobs with no instructions and no support. On day 8, I showed up to a customer's house, and the guy said, 'Do you even know what you're doing?' And I had to say no. I called the office and nobody answered. I quit the next morning." He didn't seem bitter, just confused, like he'd wandered into someone else's bad dream. Danielle and I are doing well. The settlement money paid off the car and padded our savings. I'm currently working as a sales consultant for a larger company in a similar industry. Better hours, better pay, actual benefits. Ringo still fetches socks. We took him to the lake last weekend. First real outing we've done in months. He swam for about 3 hours straight and then slept the entire drive home. Danielle took a photo of him passed out in the back seat with his tongue hanging out and sent it to her sister with the caption, "Mood." I love that dog. I love that woman. And I love that we're past this. Honestly, the whole experience changed how I think about work. I used to believe that loyalty was its own reward. That if you showed up, did your best, and built something real, the people in charge would see it and protect it. That's naive. The people in charge change. The new people don't know what you built. They just see a line item on a spreadsheet and think, "I can get this cheaper." You can't. But they don't know that until you're gone. Life goes on. Final update. Pete the lawyer sent me a message last week. He said, "Garrett, I use your recording in consultations now. Not the actual audio. I describe the scenario. It's my go-to example for how not to conduct a disciplinary meeting." I told him I was glad my pain could be educational. Danielle says I should write a book about what happened. I told her nobody wants to read about employment law. She said, "People want to read about a guy who stood up for himself. That's not employment law. That's just a good story." She might be right. She usually is. For anyone in a similar situation, here's my advice. Know your state's recording laws. Document everything. Keep copies of your work on your own devices when the company won't provide them. And never, ever accept a pay cut just because someone new walks in with an iPad and an attitude. You built what you built. That has value. Don't let anyone discount it. Would you have taken the minimum wage deal to keep the job? Or would you have done what I did? Curious what you guys think. Also, anyone know a good title for a book about getting fired by someone who doesn't understand what they bought? Asking for a friend. Here's the thing about Garrett. He didn't burn anything down. He didn't steal clients. He didn't even badmouth Margot. He just knew his rights, documented the truth, and let the consequences play out naturally. Discount Margot thought she was cutting costs. She was cutting the engine, and now she's trying to sell a car with no motor. 14 years of work, one recording, and a 5-digit check later. Garrett's doing better than ever, and the company can't give itself away. That's not revenge. That's just gravity. Drop a comment. Would you have recorded that meeting? Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.